States.
Can you dig it? And away we go, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Rob Brown Show live for the third and final day of ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we have got a show lined up for you today. We are going to be talking all the ACC football that you can handle. And yes, we may even briefly tickle college football from other conferences as well, because my dear friends, if you have not been paying attention, if you have not checked in the last couple of days, you are aware that we are now and officially inside of 1 month away to the start of the college football season. Saturday, August 23rd begins week 0 of the college football slate. Today, July the 24th, meaning that we are inside of a month away from getting this thing started and underway. Could not be more excited about it, and that is why we are here at ACC Media Days, setting up for, again, the final day of Media Days, and you know what that means. Alongside Dabo Swinney, Cade Klubnik, TJ Parker, Peter Woods, and the Clemson Tigers. We're also going to hear today from Bill O'Brien at Boston College, Brent Pry and Virginia Tech, Manny Diaz and Duke, NC State and Dave Doran, and of course, perhaps the only guy on the ACC slate these 3 days that will garner the attention, the excitement of Dabo and the Tigers, Bill Belichick and his UNC Tar Heels will be here today as well. We are going to talk to all of them throughout the course of the day. As a matter of fact, while we are not allowed to stream live from the coaches' press conferences as they are carried live on the ACC network, I will be in the press conferences for Clemson, for Duke, for North Carolina at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 2 o'clock this afternoon before I turn it over to Diesel and Cole Bryson with Wire to Wire from 3 to 7 this afternoon. I will be recording those press conferences. I will be bringing you sound and quotes throughout the rest of the day and getting it set up for Wire to Wire. We'll, of course, have our final day of ACC coverage tomorrow back in studio in Greenville, South Carolina. But we are here lined up for the next, I don't know, a bunch of hours as we wrap up coverage here at ACC Media Days. Yesterday, we heard from Mike Norvell. We heard from Thomas Castellanos, who we're going to talk a little bit about later on in the radio program. Both his potential as a quarterback, obviously, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the comments that he made a couple of weeks ago when he said that Alabama will, quote, end quote, regret their trip to Tallahassee, Florida. He was given the opportunity to walk that back yesterday. Actually, what he said was even Nick Saban couldn't save Alabama from what's going to happen on their trip to Tallahassee to take on the Noles here in a month and some change. He was given the opportunity to walk that back yesterday and said, nah, bruh, I'm standing on business. I said what I said. I believe what I said. I'd like to talk a little bit about that later on in the show. Obviously, we will spend a great deal of time today on the Clemson Tigers. We are waiting to find out if we are going to have the opportunity to sit down with Dabo Swinney and Cade Klubnik. I do want to have this discussion, and we may bring it back up for a little more in-depth conversation, but you guys know that I do my best to be an open book with you, to give you my honest and genuine thoughts on what is happening, when it's happening, in ways that I am involved with it, so you kind of have an idea of where I am coming from. And here is what I will say. Based on last week at SEC Media Days, based on this week at ACC Media Days, they're tremendous events. I think that they are fantastic, even if some of, and it just kind of is what it is, some of the smaller stations, of which we are one. I don't think that's a secret. I don't think there's anything disparaging or negative about that. It just is what it is. Some of the smaller stations have a difficult time thriving at an event like this because the networks that cover these events, the SEC network, the Big Ten network, the ACC network, which are obvious, massive assets for the conferences that they cover, they very much dictate, control, and run these events. And once you get past the networks, there are also multiple large national outlets as far as radio coverage, as far as syndicated networks, as far as propped up podcasts that belong to some of the bigger networks, etc. They are here as well. And what I have noticed in my first year covering an SEC Media Days this year and my fourth year covering an ACC Media Days this year, both of those conferences this year did something that I have not been used to the last couple of years, and that is to effectively put the stations and the schools, the outlets, I shouldn't say stations because this is for everybody, but the outlets and the schools in charge of scheduling their own interviews, which means in the days leading up to media days, it has become our responsibility, which is fine. I'm not complaining about this. I don't mind the extra work. In years gone by, you would show up to this event and you would go to the ACC table down here at Radio Row and you would put in a request for interviews the morning that these players and coaches showed up. And based on where you come from, based on the region that you broadcast in, they would prioritize players and coaches, but you would get players and coaches assigned to you in certain interview slots by the ACC. They would come over a couple of hours later and they would hand you a little slip and they would say, you're interviewing this coach at this time and this player at this time and this official at this time and this player at that time and this coach at that time. And yeah, the schedule built out. This year over in the ACC for the first time, and I do not know if this has been the standard order of procedures in the Southeastern Conference, but in the first year that I covered an event, it was the same way for them. This year they said you're in charge and the school is in charge of scheduling the own interviews. Again, no problem. I don't mind doing the extra legwork. It is what it is, but I will say, and I noticed yesterday, that the schools, as they should, and I do think this is the reason for that, the schools that are scheduling their own interviews do to some degree prioritize the way that they hand out the interviews. Obviously, the television networks are always going to get the creme de la creme of time slots and personalities. When Mike Norvell and Thomas Castellanos walked in yesterday, it was straight to the ACC media set, and they were with them for a while in times that I think the last couple of years would have been dedicated to interviews with outlets more like ours, more like some of the small stations and podcasts that are down here on Radio Row. And then once they did make their way down here, and I followed specifically yesterday, mainly because they were up first. They were the first ones here before I got out of the battle station and allowed Cole and Diesel to slide into it. Up until the moment that they left, I did follow Mike Norvell around a little bit. And what I noticed was they prioritized, again, as they should, ESPN West Palm Beach, Florida, 1010XL out of Jacksonville, WQAM up out of Tallahassee. They prioritized the stations that cover them in the market in which they, or at least in the state in which they play. And when they were done there, they did make their way to some of the more national podcasts, CFB Nation, Locked On, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't do a lot of time with local smaller stations. And that's not to say that they did none of it, but it was very clear that where the priorities were in the pecking order there. And it makes sense. And I'm not saying this again. I know it sounds like I am complaining, and I guess in some intellectually honest way I am, but I really wanted to make the point that, and I actually had this conversation yesterday with a gentleman who is sitting a couple of tables down from me from another local station who came down here from the Syracuse, the upstate New York market, because he said to me, we were talking over in the lunch area, having some lunch yesterday. We got to striking up a conversation, and he said that he was waiting on his next interview, and I said, "Who do you have?" And he said, "I don't know. My PD has the list. He's texting it to me one by one, but I really wanted to talk to Tony Elliott." And I said, "Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. He did have Fran Brown on his show. He broadcasts in Syracuse. It makes sense." He said, "I really wanted to talk to Tony Elliott, head coach at Virginia, because I am from Virginia." And I said, "Yep, so did I, former Clemson guy, whatever." And I watched Tony Elliott yesterday. And Tony Elliott spoke to the 3 stations that are here from Virginia. He spoke to a couple of the big pods, and he was on the network, and that was pretty much it. I think there's a reason for that, though, and I do think that there is moving forward. And I'm not saying that this is going to be true all season long everywhere, but I do think in the media sphere moving forward, the way that schools, the way that sports information directors, the way that conferences, the way that entities within this world handle business, I think is going to change, because I came up with this thought, this theory yesterday as I was having the conversation with this gentleman over lunch. I said, if I was Tony Elliott, I wouldn't want to talk to me either in this situation. Not that it's like, oh, I don't want to talk to that guy, but more along the lines of, what is the most important and determining factor for any college right now as to how successful their football program can be? It's how much money they bring in. That is not a conversation or debate anymore. You have to constantly be finding ways to get people to put into collectives, to get boosts to donate to the school, to get businesses excited about getting involved with your NIL program, etc. That's not an option anymore. And I think most of the coaches here would acknowledge and agree with that. So if I am Tony Elliott and I'm here at SEC Media Days and I have, 4, 5, 6 hours in this building to talk to whoever I'm going to talk to, who am I going to talk to? I'm going to talk to the people that are going to put my voice on where the most Virginia Cavalier listeners are going to be. If I am Mike Norvell at Florida State, especially considering Mike's very well aware of what the importance of the NIL program is in Tallahassee. That's why he donated $1 million to the FSU NIL fund. Now, again, I think that was a my bad for a 2-10 season situation, but he knows the importance of that. And so if I'm Mike Norvell, and I have 6, 4, 8, whatever hours here at ACC Media Days yesterday, and I'm going to talk to some folks, who am I going to talk to? I'm going to talk to the folks in West Palm, in Jacksonville, in Tallahassee. I'm going to talk to the stations that broadcast to the most Florida State Seminole, boosters and fans and businesses that I can get my voice in front of, because I need those people to hear what I am saying at the propaganda extravaganza. I need to have those people hear what I am saying. I need to do the best I can to get them excited about what I am saying and wanting to scratch some checks and send some money to the football program so that we can operate. We can have money to pay NIL. We can have money to continue to update our facilities. We can put money here and there and everywhere. I'm going to take that time to talk to them. So I do wonder what this is going to look like if this continues, if my theory is correct. And I will acknowledge to some degree, like, maybe I'm just shooting from the hip here. But just in being here and following the path of coaches and players as they walk around Radio Arrow and do interviews, following the paths of the players, which this year are scheduled by the schools. Let me be very clear. We can put in all the requests for interviews that we want. At the end of the day, the schools decide who they want to talk to, who they're going to talk to, who they're not going to talk to. I'm going to say this, not to stir up controversy, not to cause a problem. That is literally, and I mean this, never my goal. But we put in for an interview a number of weeks ago with Clemson, for Dabo, for Cade Klubnik, for Peter Woods, for TJ Parker. We wanted all 4 of them across our 2 shows this week. And we effectively got told, we'll see if we can pencil you in. It is up to Clemson if Dabo and Cade and TJ and the rest of the gang come sit down with us or not. It is up to the school. I hope that they do. We would love for them to. we do our best to provide you as much in-depth coverage as we can. Cole and I, as we pointed out yesterday, Cole and I have both gone to multiple games over the last couple of years on our own dime. We paid the gas to get there and back. We paid for the hotel rooms to stay there because we wanted to cover in spots that there maybe wasn't really a plan to get there. And we want to bring you as much Clemson football coverage as we can, but it's not up to us. We are here. We have put in the request. We have the headsets and the cameras and everything set up and ready to go. And we got told if we can pencil you in, we'll pencil you in, but we will let you know on that day. And that's fine. Again, I understand. I don't take it personally. I don't take it to heart. I get it. They have limited time here. The network is dominating the majority of the time of every highlight player and coach that comes through. The national podcasts and all that are run by those major networks, they are dominating the time of the big-time players, and it makes sense for the schools to pick and choose who they're going to speak to based on who benefits them the most. And I do wonder down the line if that is going to become something that is takes root in more places. Will there get to a point where when it is time to submit for press credentials to big games, will the schools ultimately get the power to determine who covers the games in person? Will they ultimately get the power to determine who covers post-game press conferences, who asks questions in post-game press conferences? Will there get to a point where schools decide that the dissemination of information about their teams should be behind a paywall? If you want to hear from head coach of your favorite college football program, and you want to hear directly and you want to hear immediately, you need to pay $7.99 a month to the school to become a subscriber, because that's where they put the coach. Again, it's a bit of a conspiracy theory, I acknowledge, but after last week at SEC Media Days and after this week at ACC Media Days, and watching how the coaches and the players are handled and the way that they are given out for interviews by the schools, I do wonder if there doesn't come a point where schools realize everything's about profit, everything's about money, and the best way to make sure that we are getting as much of it as we can is to be directly in control of who speaks to our coaches, who speaks to our players, when, how, where, and maybe even one day to make fans pay for that information. We'll see. I'm going to follow this as a media member because I'm genuinely very curious as to what shape this takes down the line. We got a lot to talk about, people. We are going to spend some time obviously talking about the 6 schools on the docket today here at ACC Media Days: Boston College, Virginia Tech, Clemson, Duke, North Carolina, and NC State. We'll get into the breakdowns of all of those teams. We are going to talk today about our projected order of finish in the conference. I've got to fill out my ballot today. I'm going to ask for your help. You help me decide what the projected order of finish in the Atlantic Coast Conference is. We'll come to that a little bit later on in the show. We're going to talk about potential ACC players of the year, ACC coaches of the year, and more. We got all that lined up. Plus, we dabble in a little NFL because training camps are open everywhere. We talk a little Atlanta Braves baseball. Congrats, Justin Verlander, on win number 1. Good job, bravos. I'm so proud, boys. Verlander, 1-8 on the air and is 1 on the road in Atlanta. Just beautiful work. Just beautiful work. Rob Brown, the great one, Lonzo, and you. The Rob Brown Show is live in Charlotte, North Carolina from ACC Media Days, presented by our friends at Ingles. This is the Fan Upstate.
Live from the 2025 ACC kickoff at the Hilton Charlotte Uptown, you're listening to a special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
Only on the Fan Upstate.
From the News Talk 98.9 WORD Weather Center, here's the Carolinas' most trusted forecast.
Doubt it. I doubt you'll get in trouble.
Sunshine today with our high nearing 92. Some scattered showers possible overnight, otherwise clear with a low around 73. Some showers possible into Friday, sunny with a high nearing 94. Heat index values around 102. And rain early Friday night. I'm
You're going to finish that last story?
Oh, yep.
Currently it's 74 degrees.
Sports Flash.
Injured? Just call Joy Law Firm, 864-888-8888.
Twin Peaks is the best in the game. Here, the ultimate lunch lineup boasts wall-to-wall sports and scenic views. When you're hungry and in a hurry, the Scratch Kitchen delivers lunch in the clutch. I mean, where else can you order a 29-degree draft beer and a quickie combo on your lunch break? Only at Twin Peaks, the #1 sports bar.
Twin Peaks Scratch Kitchen scores every time. Dig into hand-smashed burgers, chef-inspired flatbreads, and more at your local lodge.
And Doug.
Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally.
Com.
Now, back to the 2025 ACC kickoff in Charlotte and a special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
On the Fan Upstate.
The Rob Brown Show back on your radio. It is the Fan Upstate. Rob Brown, the great one, Lonzo, back in the Upstate Studios, live from Charlotte, North Carolina for the third and final day of ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And before I go any further, incredibly rude of me not to say hello and good morning. Well, I did say hello and good morning because we were talking to each other like 20 minutes before the show started, but on the air to say hello and good morning to the great Lonzo, in charge of every positive thing that happens throughout your entire day today. Good morning, great one from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Good morning, and hopefully some luck runs our way and we're able to get, you know, the people that we want to interview today. That would be pretty awesome.
Yep. Again, it's an interesting format. It's a format that I have never experienced before. Granted, I have done ACC Media Days this is the fourth year since I've been here. I did cover the event one or two times at my old station when I covered Florida State down in the Florida Panhandle a number of years ago. I've done some of the smaller conferences, media days throughout the years. This is the first year that I have experienced a world in which the schools delegate out their interviews and not the conference itself. And again, I'm not like, I get it. I understand why. Let me ask you this before we move on to a couple of other topics in the first hour here. Great one. I fully acknowledge as I was kind of fleshing that thought out last night at the media reception, I was having conversation with a number of other media members, and some people were along for my ride there. Some people said I was probably overthinking it a little bit too much. Did my self-acknowledged conspiracy theory about what the future might look like, does that hold any water to you, or is that just the whining of somebody who didn't get their way at a media days, as I have already been accused of once?
All right, sample size really small, and this is in comparison to the way things have been in the past. So, I mean, immediately, you and I both do this. We see worst case scenario first, and then we work our way back. So I see the signs of the things that you're talking about. I am curious, though, and I don't know how we could find out if the Big Ten is doing it the same way that the ACC and the SEC are doing.
I don't know. And actually, I will see if I can look up and figure that out. Like, ordinarily, that is obviously something that is designated and delegated to the media and not leaked out, but I'm sure it's been talked about. So I'm intrigued. I'm gonna see if I can.
We got to know somebody up there. I mean, we do know somebody, but I don't know if he's covering it.
That's fair. I will look it up. All right. I do want to get to a couple of other things. Let us start with this one. Yes, we are at ACC Media Days, and yes, we will be talking quite a bit about the Atlantic Coast Conference today. Projected order of finish ballots are due by tomorrow for me, so I'm going to walk through that with you guys, get your thoughts. We'll do our potential players and coaches of the year later on in the show, etc. But while I am at ACC Media Days, I want to take you up to Big Ten Media Days here for just a minute. Speak of the Devils, Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti is obviously at the forefront of the discussion, along with Commissioner Greg Sankey, about what is going to happen with college football moving forward. And obviously the primary discussion right now is about college football playoff expansion. And the primary discussion within that conversation is, what is the format that we are going to use? Tony Petitti has, as we reported yesterday, gone on the record now officially with a 4-4-2-2-1-3 model. 4 automatic qualifiers to the SEC, 4 automatic qualifiers to the Big Ten, 2 AQs to the ACC, 2 AQs to the Big 12, 1 AQ to the highest rated group of 6 team at the end of the year, and then 3 at-large bids for the next 3 highest rated teams. Obviously, Greg Sankey in the Southeastern Conference have said that they prefer a 5+11 model. I've given you my thinking on that. I think you would be more hard-pressed to find a year where the SEC doesn't get in 4 teams into a 16-team field than you do. And I think you would be hard-pressed not to find a number of years where they would get 5. And I think there have even been a few years, including last year, where you could make the argument that they would get 6 into a team, into a field of 16, which is why they like the 5+11. The door is open to get 5 or 6 teams in with regularity over the 4 that are guaranteed in the Big Ten plan, but with only 3 at-large spots. The Big Ten, on the other hand, as I have mentioned a number of times, I think if you go year to year and you look and delegate and find out how many teams would go in the top 16, I think the Big Ten is more often than not going to get 4. I don't think you're going to find maybe but 1 or 2 years where maybe they could sneak in a 5th. I do not think I've come up with a year yet in modern football that they would have gotten 6 in. And I think you would find at least a handful of years where they might only get 3 into a 16-team field if they went with the Big Ten's plan. The SEC wants 5+11 because they can regularly get in 5 or 6. The Big Ten will regularly get in 3 or 4. So why not guarantee yourselves 4 versus the SEC, who says, like, let's open the door for us to regularly get more because we will always get 4. At least that's the philosophy I've leaned on. Tony Petitti at the Big Ten Media Days yesterday made a statement that has kind of stirred up the college football audience to some degree. He was on ESPN yesterday, and he said, remember, Tony Petitti had a long stint with Major League Baseball and was a sports television executive as well. So he has played the game from all 3 sides, the amateur model, the college model, and the television side. He said yesterday on ESPN, quote, I know people say this is not professional sports, this is college sports, but there are things you can learn from leagues that are extremely successful and how they keep teams alive, how they have really meaningful regular seasons. Like, that's a valuable thing to study because they do it very well. He went on to say that basically there is value in finding how the pro sports run their leagues, what works and what does not work, and translating those down to the college level. And a lot of folks yesterday in the college football talkosphere and faniverse went off on the tangent of we are getting closer to the professionalization of amateur college sports. And you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Now, I don't think that Tony Petitti was doing this saying we need to make college sports pro sports. I don't think that is the argument he was making. In fact, if anything, I think Tony Petitti was kind of falling in line with a concept that was discussed here at ACC Media Days a couple of times, specifically back on day one by, for instance, Rhett Lashley, who said, let's get rid of the committee. Let's get rid of the committee. Let's have a formula where if you X, you're in, and if you do not X, you are out. Let's get rid of the committee. This is the only major sport where we have a group of people who decides who goes into the postseason and who does not. And he's correct. But as I've pointed out a number of times, it is also a very special, it is also a very unique sport that has a set of parameters around it that the NFL, the NBA, the MLS, the NHL do not have. And so you would have to, if you are going to get rid of the committees, you would have to come up with a formula that has open access to everyone that fills in the gaps in the playoff bracket. I have not seen a plan yet that feels like it would work for me. And again, there are going to be plans that work for some people and not others. I haven't come across one that works for me. I think what Tony Petitti was saying in this case was, to some degree, in order to boost up his 4-4-2-2-1-3 plan. Because you would basically say, look, much like in the NFL, the winners of the 4 divisions in both conferences get a playoff spot, and they all get to host at least one home game. If you are not one of the 4 division champs, if you are one of the next 3 teams, the best teams in football, you get a wild card spot, and you will be on the road, but you're in, whatever. I think he is making the argument that create a world in which if you are one of the best 4 teams in the Big Ten and one of the best 4 teams in the SEC and one of the best 2 teams in the Big 12, one of the best 2 teams in the ACC, you go. And his thought is, if he can draw a positive comparison to the fact that nobody complains about the NFL's playoff structure. Everybody has accepted the NFL's playoff structure. And it is because of the fact that we know what it is. We know going into the year what needs to be done. You know, throughout the course of the year, at any given moment, from week 1 to week 17 in the or 18 in the NFL, you can look and say, okay, we're this many games back, and here are the different ways that we would and would not make it in. And I think he wants to generate that in the Big Ten and the SEC, the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12 as well, but generate a way. But throughout the course of the season, the team in 5th place knows it needs to make up ground. The team in 4th place knows that they have this much breathing room. The formula would be there instead of leaning on a committee. I think a lot of people thought when Petitti was talking about this that he was taking it to the concept of salary caps and the concept of league structure and shared revenue across the game and all that. I don't think that's the case. I don't think he was talking about any of those things. I think Tony Petitti was using the, hey, pro sports have models that work. There's value in those, and we should take away from and implement some of those. All I think he was trying to do is draw a positive correlation between what the plan of the Big Ten is to select playoff teams and the way that the NFL does it, and say, look, nobody complains about the NFL. If you allow us to do it this way, nobody will complain about us either. So let's enact that plan. And it's just the bargaining chip for him, because as of right now, as we heard from Jim Phillips back on Monday, when Jim Phillips got asked not too long ago, hey, where does the ACC land on the 5+11 versus the 4+4+ model? Jim Phillips said, hey, you know, we have thoughts, but we're not there yet. I called it on Monday. I think it's a bargaining chip. It is a way for the ACC to say, hey, Big Ten, ASCC, we will throw our support behind whoever gives us the most in concessions to do so. It's like Game of Thrones, but football style. And I think Jim Phillips is just trying to make an argument that helps his cause when there is so much up in the air. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back here in just a minute from right now. We have, as we have mentioned, 6 schools on tap today: BC, VTech, Clemson, Duke, North Carolina, and NC State. Let's talk a little bit about the 2 North Carolina teams, because we have talked quite a bit about the biggest threats to Clemson. I think 2 of them are right there wrapping up today. We are wrapping up the 3rd day of ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. We are back after this on the Rob Brown Show and the Fan Upstate.
Live from the 20.
taken in what the season prognostications are for the rest of the teams around the ACC, the individual talent, the strengths and weaknesses of all of the 12 teams that Clemson will play in the regular season, the more I've come to the conclusion that this year may not be quite the cakewalk that a lot of folks are making it seem to be for the Clemson Tigers. We already know what LSU is. Brian Kelly is on it right now. And by it, of course, I mean the hot seat. I think Brian Kelly's got to make a playoff run with LSU, or the LSU fans may come up with the buyout to move on. They've got Troy in week 2. I've mentioned Georgia Tech. It was pointed out to me earlier this, well, I guess pointed out to me as I looked back at Georgia Tech last year, because I've already told you I love Brent Key. I'm a big fan of Brent Key. This was an 8-win football team last year. The L's they took at Syracuse, it was by a field goal. At Louisville, 31-19. They lost to Notre Dame 31-13. They lost to Virginia Tech 21-6, which was a game that I think if they played that game 10 times, I think Georgia Tech probably wins that game 8 out of those 10. They just dropped that one. They did go lose to Georgia, but remember, that loss to Georgia went 8 overtimes to Georgia. 8 overtimes to finally get past Georgia Tech. So it's a football team that is, to me, up and coming, at least relatively speaking to what the Yellow Jackets have been over the years. So I think that becomes a very interesting game, as it is at Bobby Dodd. They've got Syracuse, at North Carolina, at Boston College, SMU, Duke, Florida State, and then at Louisville. Depending on whether or not Clemson can stay level-headed through that entire run, that's a dangerous little ACC stretch, because we don't know what Bill Belichick and North Carolina are going to be. We're going to talk about them quite a bit today. I'm not super concerned about Boston College, but with North Carolina in the hoodie one week and SMU, their opponent in last year's ACC championship game the next week, does Boston College on the road become perhaps a bit of a sleeper trap game? Then after SMU, you've got Duke, Florida State 2 weeks after that, and then you're on the road at Louisville, a team that, in my conversations with media over the last couple of days, a lot of folks are very high on here. I do think your projected order of finish from the media is going to be Clemson 1, Miami 2, SMU 3. I would not be shocked to see the Louisville Cardinal 4. I would not be shocked to see Louisville potentially maybe sneak inside the top 3 over SMU by a point or 2. I also don't really understand why it is that, they lost, I think, 4 running backs, but they've also got a stable of young recruits and transfer dudes that a lot of people are optimistic in. SMU seems to have lost some steam, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the week. Again, you've got Florida State coming to the crib. I will tell you, I'm going to talk a little bit about Mike Norvell later, because I listened to Mike Norvell in his State of the Union presser that he gave to open up media days yesterday. I also paid attention to, went back and checked out a couple of his interviews with different stations, with some of the podcasts, etc., throughout the course of the day. And I'm going to tell you, I did not take away confidence from Mike Norvell. I took away desperation. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, but I did not really take away confidence from Mike Norvell. I took away almost a sense of desperation out of the head coach of Florida State. But maybe it is sincere. Maybe Florida State's going to be good, and then you're at Louisville. I've already told you my fear about Louisville. And obviously, after Furman at South Carolina, going to Willie B, if the Gamecocks are sitting on the possibility of a 10-win season with a win over Clemson, an 11-win season with a win over Clemson behind Lenore Sellers, that game becomes wildly dangerous. I don't think it has gone from me feeling like Clemson over 10.5 wins felt like a layup bet to I'm not so sure anymore. I think it could be a 10-2 season for this team, still win an ACC championship and get an AQ spot. But I could see anywhere from 9-3 to 12-0 for this team, depending on specifically some of the teams that we are lining up against today. Specifically, when it comes down to it, North Carolina right out of the gate. The LSU game is a coin flip. And I've said a couple of times, A loss to LSU in week 1 does by no means eliminate Clemson from the playoffs. Even if they don't win the Atlantic Coast Conference, there is still the possibility of being an at-large team if they fall in that game. But I do think if they lose to LSU, it may be very well true that winning the ACC is the path for Clemson. But you've got the Georgia Tech game. We talked about that earlier in the week. I want to spend just a couple of minutes here talking about the North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, obviously, the big story about UNC, and I am interested to later on today for the first time be in a room with the hoodie with Bill Belichick and kind of hear what he has to say and where he has landed on what this team looks like. I will start with the obvious conversation, which is, and we've had it a few times, but hey, we're at ACC Media Days. Let's jump back in. What the hell is Bill Belichick in terms of his being? I know what he is. He's a human being who is the head coach at North Carolina. I mean, metaphorically speaking, in terms of.
I mean, you said that right as someone walked by, too. That was perfect.
I know. What the hell is Bill Belichick as a college football coach is how I should have phrased that. I have made it no secret. I think it's going to be an abject failure. I think this is going to be catastrophic for North Carolina. I'm not going to say that they're going to regret having fired Mack Brown after last year, a year in which North Carolina lost to James Madison, lost to Duke, to Pitt, to Georgia Tech, to Boston College, and wrapped the year with an L to NC State. I'm not going to say that they're going to have regretted moving on from Mack Brown, because I really do think that Mack Brown had entered the territory. And I like Mack Brown. He's one of the nicest college football coaches I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, talking to, and interviewing. Also has the strongest shoe game in all of college football. But I do think he got to the point where the game probably passed him by. And I'm not just talking about X's and O's on the field. I am also talking about the NIL stuff and the portal stuff, and the fact that, as I've mentioned, one of the reasons to me that college football coaches gripe as much as they do is very simply because their job got a lot harder over the last couple of years. They're getting paid more than they've ever been paid before, but the job got harder. So what is Hoodie? What is Bill Belichick as a college coach? I've mentioned, and Lonzo and I are opposed on this take, I think it's going to be an abject failure. I do not think, and I said this last night on BetMGM tonight to Ryan Horvat and PJ Glasser, I do not think that Bill Belichick's way of running an NFL team will work at the college level, because we know, it's not a secret, we know what Bill Belichick's way of running his NFL team was. Very much with an iron fist. Very much with the mentality of, I say it, it goes. That's how that's what the Patriot way was. That is part of the reason that I think they brought Mike Vrabel back, because while I do not think that Mike Vrabel is going to be the same iron-fisted tyrant that Bill Belichick was, and that's not derogatory, it worked. They won a whole lot of Super Bowls. I think Mike Vrabel will bring that Patriot mentality of, like, head coach says it, it goes, and that's just what it's going to be. So Bill Belichick's mentality of running the locker room with an iron fist, I don't think it's going to work in college football. The reason it can work in the NFL, even with guys making millions of dollars, is because of the contracts. It's because of the multi-year contracts. It's because of the fact that there is an obligation by players once they sign contracts to act in certain ways. Then if they do not live up to that, not only can they have that money ripped away from them, they can end up in a spot where nobody else wants to give them more of it later because of that. That's not going to work at college football, because the money that they are paid is paid through NIL. It's not coming from the franchise. The obligation is not there. And with the transfer portal, if a kid plays a year and goes, this sucks and I hate it, I did not know that my head coach was going to rain fire down on us constantly, they can just leave. And they don't have to jump through hoops. They don't have to make sure they get a degree. They don't have to make sure that they do. They can just go at the end of the year, portal's open, cool, deuces, I'm out, adios, bye Felicia, and get on to the next school. That is a problem, I think, for head coaches. That and I said this to Horvat last night. I said, I know, and I think it's true of our listening audience in the Ville too. I think a lot of people think that this is a weak, soft, woke, whatever word you want to use mentality, that you're going to kind of, to some degree, have to, and I know it sounds that way, you have to make kids feel special if you want them to stick around, right? Like, you have to make them feel special. Like your school, this is why I've said schools need to lean on what it is that they can do for players. It used to be very much one-sided. What can a
So,
player
so
do for
Bill should walk around and give everybody hugs?
I'm not saying he has to give them hugs. I'm saying what the philosophy and mentality of Bill Belichick as the head coach of the Patriots was, and I'm calling the shot that that's not going to work in college football.
See, I think it will, because if you treat it like the NFL, which it's becoming, then it's no more about that kid being loyal to the school. It's, you have transfer portal, you can grab kids out of there, you can do all that kind of stuff. So if he treats it that way and his GM treats it that way, when in the past college football has been, the relationship between the coach and the kids and all that kind of stuff, it's more about business now. That's why I think what he's going to do is going to work.
It is more about business now. I completely agree with that. And I am willing to, the philosophy, the spin from that for me becomes, if I as an employee, because we are going to, for the sake of the conversation, frame it that way. If I as an employee am working for a place where my general manager makes me miserable day to day, right? Like I just kind of feel like I'm a cog in the wheel. Rob Brown and I do not feel that way working for the Fan Upstate. I am using this as a hypothetical example, just so we are very clear.
Hey, I'm a cog, but I'm a managing cog.
You're a managing cog. I'm not even a managing cog. I'm just a plain old regular run-of-the-mill blue-collar cog. If I'm a cog in the wheel and I feel like I'm not special, like I'm not valued in the role I'm in, I'm just here to fill a gap. In radio, like it's not like there's 185 other available jobs out there for me. I can't just up and move to the next one. It is a slog to get a job in this industry. How many college football programs are there around the United States of America? And if you're a good player, and I'm not saying this will be true about the third string left tackle from North Carolina, but here's the reality. If a guy's good enough to get a scholarship to go be the third string at left tackle at North Carolina, there's an Appalachian State, there's a Troy, there's a South Alabama out there that goes, that dude is as good of any recruit as we're ever going to get. And so if the Hoodie's going to bring that mentality to college football, I think you'll end up seeing a lot of guys that go, I don't want to spend my college years doing this. Now, there will be some football players that come out of high school going, I absolutely want that classic old school, hard-nosed, gritty college football mentality, and Bill can win those guys over. But are there enough of them in the social media era? The answer to me is probably not. I don't think that's true. So we're going to talk more about North Carolina, the players, the X's and O's, because there are some dudes on this team. Kobe Paysour could be a dude this year. They bring back, I think, 3 starting offensive linemen who were very successful last year. Maybe there is an out here for the Hoodie. I'm just not convinced his philosophy works at the college level. This year will be the grand experiment. Now, ladies and gentlemen, speaking of grand, have a grand old time. I should have done better. It's Sports Flash time.
It is an experiment every day, though, to see if I can get it right. Spencer Strider took his 8th loss of the year as the Braves fell to the Giants 9-3. Strider went 5 innings, giving up just 5 hits and 3 runs while striking out 7. Justin Verlander improved his record to 1-8 for the Giants with the win. The Braves had 7 hits but didn't score their first runs until the 7th inning, already down 9-0. Shohei Ohtani homered in his 5th straight game for the Dodgers last night, tying the franchise record for consecutive games with a home run. Ohtani now leads the NL with 37 homers on the season. I think that's pretty good. I'm pretty sure that's pretty good. The NFL popularity and financial success were illustrated in public documents from the Green Bay Packers yesterday, stating they received league revenue sharing of $432.6 million, up from $400 million distributed by the league last year. That's really good.
Up to the
The Rob Brown Show is live in Charlotte, North Carolina for the third and final day of ACC Media Days, presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. Thanks to Ingles for being a fantastic corporate partner and sponsor to allow us to go behind the scenes. Don't forget, Wire to Wire with Cole Bryson and Diesel will also be live here today at ACC Media Days, 3 to 7 this afternoon. We've got you this morning for the next 3 hours, all the way up until 10 a.m. On the docket today, Boston College, Virginia Tech, Clemson, Duke, North Carolina, and NC State. We're going to break down those 6 teams. Coming up later on in the morning, we're going to talk about our projected order of finish in the conference. We'll decide who are the biggest threats to the Clemson Tigers as they seek to win the Atlantic Coast Conference once more. We'll also talk about player and coach of the year candidates now that we have gotten the opportunity to hear from the majority of the 17 schools that will play their football under the ACC's banner this year. All of that coming up throughout the course of the show this morning. Yesterday as well, Diesel and Cole Bryson had the opportunity to have a couple of chats with players, coaches, and officials last night. We're going to run back 1 or 2 of those for you because I thought there were some very interesting interviews that took place, and we will have that for you later on in the show, so make sure you stick around for the remaining 3 hours. But it is 7:02 in the a.m. It is the morning portion of the day, which means you have to go to work. And let's keep it a buck. Your job's not as cool as mine is, at least not today anyway. So that means that you are going to, at some point, have to take a break. You're going to have to take a break and walk away because, well, first off, you're legally required to be given a break. So, just take it. Don't be silly, all right? But I know what you're going to do on that break. You're going to walk down the hallway to the break room. Go into that one corner where the boss can't see you when he walks down the hallway, and you're going to talk sports with your friends, with your family, with your coworkers, whoever you might spend the day with. And if you're going to do that, you got to know what's going on in the world of sports. And if you've got to know what's going on in the world of sports, worry not, my dear, dear friends. That's why Lonzo and I, every morning at 7 a.m., we do this.
Are you ready for the playbook of the peculiar, the almanac of the absurd, and the encyclopedia of the extraordinary? Well, you better be, because we're diving headfirst into the 3 top stories that will have your coworkers saying,
"Oh no, don't start."
Where they take their first bathroom break.
No.
Here we go.
Welcome to the Water Cooler Cheat Sheet on the Fan Upstate.
It is the Water Cooler Cheat Sheet, the top 3 sports stories that you need to know before you get to the office and start talking sports with your friends, your family, your coworkers, whoever you spend the day with. You're going to talk sports. And when you do, this is what you're going to talk about. Let's get to item number 1. I have said a number of times that there will be a point where the Braves are not a water cooler cheat sheet item, mainly because they make me sad all the time, and I don't want to talk about them if I'm not obligated to do so. But when something happens that is just out of the norm, out of the usual, which is far more regular than I would like to be the case for this baseball team this year, it does have to make the cheat sheet. And yesterday, the Atlanta Braves 9-3 loss to the San Francisco Giants. That is exactly and precisely what happened. Justin Verlander has been one of the most disappointing pitchers in Major League Baseball this year, getting paid buku money from the Giants. He entered yesterday's game 0-8 on the season and inside of the bottom 100 pitchers in baseball in terms of ERA and everything else. It's just not good. Well, congrats, Justin Verlander. He picked up his first win as a San Francisco Giant in the year of 2025, going 5 innings, giving up 1 hit, 0 earned runs, striking out 3, walking 5. It was good enough of a stat line for Verlander to be credited with the win. San Francisco would pick up a 3 spot in the 5th, 6th, and 7th innings. Atlanta would not score their first runs, all 3 of them coming in the bottom of the 7th, could not find the plate again. Spencer Strider took his 8th loss on the year. He is now 4-8, 5 innings, 5 hits, 3 runs all earned, 7 strikeouts, but did give up a pair of home runs on 104 pitches. The Braves offense racked up 7 hits, but they went 2-10 with runners in scoring position, left 9 runners stranded. Last night did Atlanta. The Braves fall to 44-57. They are now 13 games below 500. I think maybe the most disappointing number is not even the fact that they are that far below 500. I think the disappointing number is the Braves are now 500 at home on the field. Truist is not the bastion that it used to be, not the fortress that it has been in years gone by. Atlanta is also now a full 14 games behind the New York Mets, who lead the division, 13.5 behind the second place Phillies, and now a full 4 games behind. Yes, this is correct. No, it is not an audible typo. The Miami Marlins, more importantly, now Atlanta, just 3.5 games up on the Washington Nationals for last place in the National League East. It is not great, Bob. Not great, Bob. That is what it is. All right, let's get to item number 2. I've told you before, I'm dumb, so I don't really know how big numbers work. I'm also poor. I've never had $1 million in the bank account. I'm trying my best. I haven't got there yet. So sometimes the numbers blow me off the page a little bit, but I am very interested in the business side of the business of professional sports. The Green Bay Packers serve as really the only window that we as fans have into some of the accounting of NFL teams, because they are a publicly owned football team. They are obligated legally to disclose their financial numbers. They are the only team in the National Football League that meets that criteria. The Packers yesterday did release their financials, and it included a very impressive number. Last year, national revenue per team, that is money that is collected by the NFL and distributed to each of its 32 franchises for their participation in the league. Last year, national revenue topped out at $402.3 million. That is the first time in the history of the National Football League that league revenue shared with teams went north of $400 million. This year, $432.6 million distributed to each team from the NFL. That means that the league shared more than $13 billion in revenue from the previous fiscal year. $13 billion. Now, most of that money, we do know, comes from TV deals. The league at this point is growing at about a 7% per year increase in revenue. That is where that $32 million rise in distributed revenue comes from. That is what is responsible for it. There are some interesting things. For instance, the Packers helped the profit from operations, which is the money that the Packers directly take in, went from $60.1 million to $83.7 million. Local revenue boosted by hosting a 9th regular season home game since the league went to a 17-game schedule, increased from $251.8 million to $286.4 million. The Packers' corporate reserve fund grew to $579 million, up from $536 million. Of course, the Packers are kind of an interesting team, as that they are publicly owned by more than 500,000 shareholders. They are therefore unable to accept private equity investments in the same way that some teams have done to raise money in the last couple of years. According to the team, over 5.2 million shares of stock are owned by 539,029 stockholders, none of whom receive any dividends. To protect against someone taking control of the team, no single person can own more than 200,000 of the 5.2 million shares. But one thing that is very interesting is because they are the only team we know of that has a corporate reserve. I'm sure other teams do. We just don't get a look into the financials of those private entities. The Packers also are one of the teams that invest the most back into the team, $675 million back into Lambeau Field since the team hired a new general manager, Mark Murphy, a number of years ago. So effectively this. The NFL is super popular and profitable, dudes. Like that's your takeaway. They make a lot of money, like a lot of money. Just about every number that the Packers reported publicly went up by $30+ million. That is their local revenue, that is their business in revenue, and that is the shared revenue from the NFL itself. Let's wrap it up with item number 3. This is a story that to me is not a story. This is a story that yesterday took off in the college football discussion ranks. This is a story that a lot of people were paying attention to yesterday, and I think maybe to some degree took it as a little bit more than Tony Petitti intended it to be. Speaking yesterday at Big Ten Media Days, which are taking place in Las Vegas, Nevada, as we speak, Tony Petitti said yesterday, quote, I know people say this is not professional sports, this is college sports, but there are things you can learn from leagues that are extremely successful and how they keep teams alive, how they have really meaningful regular seasons. Like, that's a valuable thing to study because they do it very well, end quote. And a lot of people started taking some level of panic away from that because I do know that one of the fears, although it has not necessarily been verbalized to me in a way that has let me share the panic. And I also think to some degree, there's just some level of acceptance of it is an inevitable outcome at this point. But one of the big fears that is regularly disclosed by college football fans is that there is an NFLification of college football taking place right now in college football. There is fear that we are making our way to a world where college football has the same structure, setup, etc., that the NFL does. And I know a lot of people are growing ever more concerned about that potentially becoming or maybe the reality. I just want to point out that I do not think that this was Tony Petitti saying we are going to do a college football league that operates the way the NFL does. Quite the opposite. I think Tony Petitti was trying to say that the Big Ten's college football playoff expansion should be done his way. Remember, there's the fight going on between the Big Ten and the SEC right now. The Big Ten wants the 4-4+ model. 4 AQs to the Big Ten, 4 to the SEC, 2 to the ACC, 2 to the Big 12, 1 to the highest ranked group of 5 champion, or group of 6 champion now, I guess we should say, and 3 at-large spots, or as I think Tony Petitti would call them, wildcard spots. And basically what I think he meant was when you look at the NFL's playoff structure, nobody complains about it. Nobody dunks on it. Nobody hates on it. In fact, we as NFL fans largely accept it as a great way to determine who goes into the postseason. You and 3 other opponents play in a pod, and the best team of that pod goes to the playoffs. If you are not the best team in one of your 4 pods in your conference, you can still earn an at-large spot by being one of the best wildcard teams, one of the 3 wildcard teams out of your conference. And I think what Tony Petitti is trying to effectively say here is we are turning the conferences into divisions, much like the NFL. We are turning them into divisions. Now, in fairness, in the NFL, there is 1 divisional winner, and there are 3 at-large wildcard spots, and that's how it goes. I think what Petitti is saying here is even if the balance of how many champs from or top-ranked teams get to go from each conference, this puts a formula into play. It gets rid of the concept of a committee, at least to some degree. You will still, unless he comes up with another plan, have to have a committee to determine who the 3 at-large spots are. But for 13 of the 16 spots, Those spots are determined by a formula. And this is something I said on Monday when Rhett Lashley said we should get rid of the committee. My response was, okay, if you want to get rid of the committee, you need to come up with a formula. But I personally, me, Rob Brown, I am unwilling to sacrifice access to the college football playoffs by as many schools as possible. I am unwilling to sacrifice access to the playoffs in return for a formula. To me, your formula must still maintain as much access to the college football playoffs as possible. Tony Petitti's plan, the reason I'm a 5+11 guy, Tony Petitti's plan effectively limits access to the college football playoff to a large degree for a huge number of football teams around the United States, which is why I'm against it. But the argument that Tony Petitti is making here is not we need to NFLify ourselves entirely. I think what he's saying is we take a playoff model from the NFL where we have X amount of teams that are locked into X amount of spots from X amount of conferences. There is no committee. There is no argument. There is no conversation about bubbles and snubs and this is and that. If you're one of the top 4 teams in our league, you go. And if you're not, you fight for a wild card spot. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. So I think Tony Petitti kind of caused a bit of a stir with his comment yesterday of there's a lot we can take from professional leagues. I really don't think it was anything more than utilizing that statement to further his own agenda and getting college football where he and the Big Ten wanted to be moving forward, which, again, I don't fault him because that's, literally his job. Let's take a break. We'll come back here in just a minute. We have started looking at a few of the teams that are going to be active today here at ACC Media Days. Boston College, Virginia Tech, Clemson, Duke, North Carolina, and NC State. I want to talk about the teams from today that I do believe are threats to the Clemson Tigers. That is North Carolina, a large unknown with Bill Belichick, and NC State. We all know about the relationship between Dave Doran and Dabo Swinney. We'll break those teams down at length throughout the course of this hour. We will talk about the ACC at large through the rest of the show. It's the Rob Brown Show live at ACC Media Days, presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. It's the Fan Upstate.
From the 2025 ACC kickoff at the Hilton Charlotte Uptown, you're listening to a special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
Only on the Fan Upstate.
Yes, Brandon, it is a Trash Pandas cap.
From the News Talk
It is also my favorite new cap in the
Weather
collection.
Center, here's the
Big
Carolinas'
fan.
most
Big
trusted
fan.
forecast
Let's get some rotation.
on the Fan
We'll be right back.
Upstate.
special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
On the Fan Upstate.
ACC Media Days, the third and final day of ACC Media Days, underway here in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings, and we love Ingles for being a tremendous corporate sponsor. We appreciate them tremendously. Make sure you stop by your local Ingles, especially since we are less than a month away from college football. If you're like me, you know day one is going to be lit. And by that, I mean Thursday, and then Friday, and then Saturday, and then Sunday, and then we run it back like 4 days after that to start it all over again. Ingles is your tailgating headquarters for all of your tailgating supplies. Head to your local Ingles. So let's talk about some of the teams that we have got coming up here today. Boston College, Virginia Tech, Clemson, Duke, North Carolina, and NC State all on the docket this beautiful Thursday. We have talked a little bit already about UNC, or at least we talked about Chapel Bill Belichick making his way to Raleigh, North Carolina. I am interested, obviously, in y'all's opinion on Bill Belichick, because it seems to be relatively split, or at least around the media folks that are here and the folks that I've talked to doing interviews and podcasts and radio shows the last couple of days. Lonzo believes that the mentality, the philosophy of Bill Belichick that he brings from the NFL will work, will be successful. I don't. I think it's going to be an abject failure. It seems to be a pretty decent split around here of people who think it will/won't work. What I am interested in, though, is what is Bill Belichick working with in Chapel Hill? Drake May went to the NFL. Turns out I owed him like an edible arrangement, an apology letter, because I thought Drake May was going to be a bust in the NFL. Turns out he got it done his rookie year. The Patriots are on the trend up. A lot of folks in on New England this year. Omarion Hampton last year going into the NFL draft, or I should say earlier this year going into the NFL draft. Omarion Hampton was this is the guy you're going to be talking about at the end of the year out of the first round. I think Omarion Hampton's going to be a stud. The reason I think he's going to be a stud in the NFL is because, well, he's not at Chapel Hill anymore. There's no Omarion Hampton running through that door. So what is Bill working with this year? I think there are a number of questions. The Heels had 3 different starting quarterbacks last year. After spring workouts, Hoodie brought in Gio Lopez from South Alabama, kind of a dual threat guy, and the early indications were that Lopez would be at the top of the depth chart. But remember, Max Johnson is still there as well. The son of former Super Bowl winner Brad Johnson was in LSU Tiger right out of the gate, but has transferred out, finds his way to Chapel Hill. Max Johnson was QB1 last summer after he moved over from LSU to A&M, left A&M, went to UNC, but suffered a broken leg in the opener, cost him the season, and was still rehabbing from that broken leg earlier this spring. So there is no guarantee that he will even be ready by week 1. On the flip side, we mentioned Omarion Hampton, 1,600 yards last year. So who's going to replace him in the backfield? You have Davion Goss, who gained 343 yards, but did average 4.9 yards per carry. Big bowling ball style guy. You also have Benjamin Hall, a transfer from Michigan. They will return behind an offensive line that does return 3 starters from last year in Trayvon Green, Aiden Banfield, and Austin Blaise. But they also have 3 transfers in from relatively successful programs as well. So there are assets across the offensive line for North Carolina. As far as wide receivers go, that's another big question mark. Jordan Shipp, who comes back from last year, had some success. Jordan Shipp is expected to be a frontline starter at the wide receiver position this year, but not a ton of breakout in his career so far. He has also been a little bit further down on the depth chart than he will be this year. The interesting name is going to be Kobe Paysour. Paysour is another potential standout, but Paysour is also a guy that has had 3 foot surgeries so far in his young career. He is a guy that has been off the field. It is his senior year, so his last opportunity, but the guy's been averaging one major injury per year. So on the offensive side of the football, they are good across the offensive line, or at least on paper, they should be good across the offensive line. The problem is that the skill positions, it's just question marks everywhere. Gio Lopez did have a lot of success at USA before he transferred over. But does that success at lower level football for the Jags, does that transfer to finding the same amount of success with North Carolina in the ACC? That is obviously not a guarantee. Over on the defensive side of the football, Steve Belichick, the son of Bill, obviously, makes his way over from Washington, where he was the defensive coordinator last year. But after spring workouts, starting defensive end Bo Atkinson, who was expected to be a major player, got recruited by and transferred to Ohio State, where he is going to be a starter. Linebacker Amari Campbell entered the portal, and while Amari Campbell was not a big, massive player last year, was expected to be a starter this year. And that meant that Steve Belichick very much had to lean on the portal this year. They may start alongside two returning starters in cornerback Marcus Allen and safety Caleb Cost. They may start 8 transfer players across the defense here. Now, the good news is they did bring in some transfer guys that have some level of experience. Kamari House comes over from Washington. DeAndre Robinson at the defensive tackle spot from Florida. Mekhi Gabeir comes over from Nebraska by way of Mizzou. These are all guys that have starting reps for Power 4, Power 3, Power 2, whatever power we're on now, conference programs over the last couple of years. So to me, it really is a narrative of change in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I'm not just talking about at the head coaching spot where Bill Belichick steps down from the NFL and up to college football, although that is the biggest change that there is a question mark about. You're talking about a 73-year-old head coach. Remember, I go back to, and this is another part of the evidence I use to say that I don't think this is going to work, though we will find out. When the South Carolina Gamecocks brought over Paul Mainieri to be the head coach in baseball, remember one of the things that I said was you were talking about a guy who is in his early 70s to coach a locker room full of dudes that are 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. And you're talking about a guy who has been out of the game for a few years. Well, Bill Belichick has never been in this game. Yes, he's coached football. Yes, he's coached at the NFL level, but he's never coached at college. And it is obviously a very different world. And on top of that, he's 73. I do wonder, like, he can walk in and he can put on his Super Bowl rings and go, guys, I've won at the highest level, fall in line. But I also think we're in a different era of college sports where you have to speak to players differently, treat players differently. And I don't know if he's going to do that. But I also think the concept of change on the field is massive as well. You were talking about having to change at quarterback. You were talking about a guy in Max Johnson who was expected to show up and be the guy, had the injury. You had to roll out 2 other quarterbacks off and on throughout the year last year. You have just lost an all-ACC running back. You do not have anything guaranteed there. There's not a lot going on. And this was something that was pointed out to me yesterday that I thought was kind of an interesting thought. And I want to see, Lonzo, if you go along with it. Because over the course of the offseason, the primary conversation surrounding North Carolina was what? Bill Belichick and his girlfriend, right? Like, that was the big conversation, was Billy and Jordan. And it got to a point where even for me, who does think it is important, who does think that it plays into Bill's ability to do his job, even for me, it got to a point where, like, are we really talking about this again? And it got pointed out to me yesterday that one of the reasons that Bill and Jordan were at the forefront of every North Carolina story was because of the fact that there was effectively an embargo on this team in terms of information coming out in the spring. I talked to a gentleman from a station in North Carolina yesterday who said it was hard for him to get information about the team that he covers in North Carolina because there was an embargo. And that sounds very Belichickian. That sounds like the Bill Belichick method, even when he was with New England, when they were a dynasty for a decade and some change. It was tough to get information out of Hoodie and the Patriots, and it feels like he took that same mentality to UNC, which, I've said a number of times that while I do not think that Bill is going to be successful at North Carolina, one of the takes that I had was I also think this is a mystery team this year. I just don't know a lot about it, and I think it is a fantastic point that that's because Bill Belichick's in charge. He doesn't want you to know a lot about it, which is why we don't know where Max Johnson is in his rehab. We don't know if Gio Lopez, who has reportedly earned the QB1 spot, truly has. Nobody from North Carolina has confirmed that. We talked about Kobe Paysar with the wide receiver with multiple foot surgeries over the years. Where is he? Is he ready to go? We don't know. They have pretty much kept the media spotlight off of the heels during what has been probably the most interesting offseason in North Carolina football history, and we just don't know anything about this team. And while I do think that is by design, obviously, it kind of makes the Tar Heels coming into the season, whether you think Bill's going to be a success or a failure, Zoe, it makes them an intriguing team nonetheless, because I don't think anybody in this building really has an idea of what this football team is going to look like when they roll out week 1, September 1st against TCU.
And that's a lot of fun, by the way. But a couple of things that you said that you were talking about his relatability. He does have relatability because of his girlfriend. If he relates to her and her age group, then he can relate to all those other guys that are about the same age. And they can also go, yeah, but coach, yeah. So that will give him some relatability. The other thing is he has an advantage over a lot of college football coaches because he knows how to handle players with salaries. And whether you want to call it a salary or not, they're getting paid by the schools now. And they also have NIL. So these are employees, and he knows how to deal with employees. There are a lot of college coaches that either, it would seem, got out of the game or have to learn how to do this with this kind of money instead of players coming in basically poor and having to depend on the school. And now they have money. Bill already knows how to deal with that. He doesn't have to adjust to it. He already knows how to deal with it. Can he still coach football? I think that's the biggest question.
When we come back, I would like to respond to those two thoughts, both the relatability, which for me is an important part of the conversation. It is the number one reason that I've said I do not think Bill Belichick will be successful, and Lonzo's take on that, and the concept of being able to, or the knowledge of how the wisdom of how to deal with players who are being paid, whether you want to call it salary, NIL, whatever. I would like to address and respond to both of Lonzo's claims when we come back here in just a minute. We'll also turn the page to NC State, talk about Dave Doran's Wolfpack, because they are, to me, perhaps one of the biggest wild cards in this conference this year. We'll address both of those things as we continue talking ACC football at day 3, the third and final day of ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Rob Brown Show is live on location, presented by our friends at Ingles here on the Fan Upstate.
Live from the 2025 market, low prices, love the savings.
I'm a fan upstate.
The Rob Brown Show back on your radio. It is the Fan Upstate. Glad to have you. We are live at ACC Media Days, the third and final day of ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am Rob Brown, the Great Lonzo, back in the network studios. The teams being represented today beginning to make their way into the building, the Charlotte Hilton Uptown, where we are currently located, have been the last couple of days and are wrapping up today. Of course, we will take you up till 10 a.m. today. And then at 3 o'clock, Wire to Wire with Cole Bryson and Diesel will return to the airwaves for their 4 hours to wrap up ACC Media Days. They will be the legitimately last people in the building today. So we look forward to what they have to say. Now, I do want to get back to a conversation that we were having in the last segment. We have been talking this morning quite a bit about the 6 teams that are on the docket for today: Boston College, Virginia Tech, Clemson, Duke, North Carolina, and NC State. So while talking about those teams, we have obviously landed on North Carolina. And a point got made to me last night that I thought was very interesting. It is that North Carolina is very interesting, and North Carolina is very interesting, I believe, honestly, because the Belichickian method has been working in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Now, I don't know if it's going to work when we get to football. That's the discussion, but it has worked in terms of the fact that of these schools that will be playing in the ACC this year, 17 of them, I honestly think I know the least about what the 2025 North Carolina Tar Heels are going to turn out to be. And the theory is that is working right now is because of Bill Belichick. Even when he was at New England, Bill Belichick was very big on not being very big in the media. He wants to let you know the least amount about his football team as possible, and he will go to great lengths to try to keep that information as under wraps as is possible. So we've been having a conversation about the Tar Heels. We've been having a conversation about Bill Belichick because I think it is fair and accurate to say the reason Hoodie is the conversation is because Hoodie's created a world where there's nothing else to have a conversation about. We can talk about Gio Lopez coming over from South Alabama and what he did at South Alabama during his time there, but I can't tell you if what the kid did last year at USA is going to translate to success in the SE or in the ACC at UNC. I don't think anybody can say that, and I think anybody who says he definitely will is just taking a shot in the dark. I think we're dialed in on Bill Belichick because Bill Belichick has all but prevented us from knowing anything else about the rest of what's happening with his program. So, with all of that being said, we have had the conversation about Bill Belichick. And in the last segment of the show, I brought up the fact that Hoodie's 24-year-old girlfriend, as a 73-year-old man, I think part of the reason she was a part of the conversation is because there wasn't really much else to have a conversation about. Lonzo said, and back in the first hour, I also said, much like Paul Maneri at South Carolina, I just don't think you're going to find much common ground for a 73-year-old and a 18 or 19-year-old to connect on. I just don't. Now, Lonzo made a point, and I don't have an issue with it if we go with it from a, dare I say, almost chauvinistic stance of 73, 23, hot chicks are hot chicks. Am I right? Like that's and that's fine because at the end of the day, women are awesome. We're all big fans. All right. So yes, I think there is some connection with the concept of Bill being able to brag to his football team, I can pull hotter college chicks than you can. And that's a great running joke.
It would be, but by the way, it doesn't have to. The media has already done that for him. I mean, it's been plastered around everywhere, and I'm sure they've seen her on campus. So I mean, as a dude, and dudes being dudes will look and go, "Did you see who's with Coach?" And then suddenly you can relate a little bit.
I love the way that you see the world sometimes, Lonzo. I really do. I'm jealous of the way you see the world.
Yeah, the tone was not, but that's fine.
Oh, no. Let me be very clear.
I'm coming from a locker room standpoint, and I'm putting myself in being in the locker room. And I don't think locker rooms have changed that much over the years. There have been attempts to get them to change, but I don't believe that they have changed, that they're still locker rooms.
Again, I don't disagree with that. I think at the end of the day, that there's very little that a 73-year-old and an 18-year-old can connect on. Hot chicks is always going to be one of those things. That just is what it is. What I am saying here is that also works on, to me, it works on the assumption that like the relationship between those two is just a genuine, mutual, beneficial, lovey-dovey, everything's great, we're not utilizing each other for special things relationship. I don't think that is the case. I think that the number of and the way that businesses have propped up around this young lady since she got with Bill Belichick tells you a lot. Maybe Bill is just a wonderful philanthropist, but I don't think that's really the narrative around that guy. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just don't see that the way that you see that, and that's okay. What I would say is that I don't know that I'll put it this way. I've been around some older gents, some senior fellers that have talked about women my age, etc. And most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time I go, dude, you're 73 years old. Gross. Maybe chill out, man. Like that's weird, my guy. Like don't do that, or at least keep it in the inside portion of the mouth.
Well, until you've been there. I mean, so when you're 73, we'll see how you think.
Again, not saying that he didn't think that way. I'm just saying I don't think, hey, I'm 73, but I'm dating a 24-year-old is the connection to the locker room that you think that it is. That's
and I will say that it's working right now. The fact that the distraction is working right now as we're having this conversation.
No. You're having a different conversation. What I'm saying is 1,000% it's a distraction. And if it's intended to be a distraction, then great job, Bill Belichick. It is the greatest distraction in the history of college football. Ain't no doubt about it. But that's not what we were talking about. We were talking about, is that a locker room connection between Bill and the players?
Listen, I know you're saying you don't think that way, but you're still a guy, and you can't understand it unless you think that way a little bit. And it's definitely a connection, without a doubt.
I disagree. But again, the only people who can tell us that is true or not is every individual player in that locker room. Fine square, I get all that. The flip side of that, the second thing that you brought up about Bill Belichick coming into the season is that Bill Belichick, and I think it's fair to say, with a couple of other exceptions, Bill Belichick knows how to handle a roster full of dudes who are getting paid, which is absolutely and entirely correct. And how to handle the situation where he's got dudes that are getting paid and also has a general manager who handles the pay side of it. So he just has to handle the personal relationship side of it. And that's absolutely true. He does have more experience. I would also, as I said earlier in the show, make the point that college kids getting NIL and revenue share is a hell of a lot different than NFL dudes who have NFL contracts. It's just different. Now, there are some similarities.
So the money is different? I mean, I know there's more in I know there's more in the NFL, but this is also more money than most of these kids have ever seen in their entire life. So you're saying that the money in the NFL is a different color than the money in the because I don't.
What I'm saying. What I'm saying is that a kid making rev share from a college or university is not
getting paid. Yeah.
Is getting rev share, getting paid. I don't dress it up however you want to dress it.
He's an employee. I don't know why you can't just say he's an employee.
I don't know why it's such a big deal to you that we do.
Because I just want you to say it.
Okay. There are employees getting paid. And by employees getting paid, I mean the people that are the reason that we tune in to watch football and the reason that there is revenue sharing anyway. They are revenue shared. They are paid. Their salary, their employees. The semantics of the argument aside.
Did that feel weird?
No, I do, because I don't care. It doesn't bother
you do, or you wouldn't get we wouldn't debate every time I call them an employee and you have to call it a different name.
I call it the name that it is. It is revenue sharing. That is
And-
not for the record. That is not a salary. That is revenue sharing.
Okay.
Now, the discussion here that you brought up that I wanted to respond to, because I do think it is valid, is that Bill Belichick has experience working with people who are getting paid to play football, employees getting paid to play football. I'll use your vernacular here so that we're on the same page for the meat of what I think is the conversation here. I would say that there are a handful of differences. The first one is that while not every school, it is primarily only the largest conferences, the Power 2 specifically, are obligated to give that $20.5 million in revenue sharing, wages, salary, whatever, to their players, employees, students, whatever. The options to say, nah, this isn't worth the money for me, and to go somewhere else to get the same salary, not the same as they are in the NFL. If somebody hated Bill Belichick in the New England Patriots and said, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be a part of this program anymore, the options that they had to depart the program are extremely limited. There are not a lot of them on the table. And even if they are not guaranteed that they are going to have a landing spot anywhere else in the NFL. And they certainly are not going to be guaranteed a landing spot where somebody is going to say, we'll give you that contract, we'll give you the same money, whatever. The greatest players, yeah, if they decide to bail on a team and a team says, okay, we'll cut you, we'll trade you, we'll waive you, whatever. The greatest players to some degree get to call their shot and end up on another team, and for many of their cases, where they want to be. At the college football ranks, for a player at North Carolina, there's a lot of places that they could end up, which is why most of these teams have 19, 20, 21, 22 transfers out, 19, 20, 21, 22 transfers in. The flexibility, the availability of roles, jobs for these players, employees, that they can go and get rev share, a salary, whatever you want to label them at all as. The opportunities they have to go elsewhere and do something else is so much greater to me in college football than it is at the pros. At the professional level, once a contract is signed, the team, the franchise, the organization, the business has most of the power over that relationship moving forward. I think it is the opposite way around in college football. I think the players have created a world in which they have a majority of the power in this, what is supposed to be mutually beneficial relationship. So Bill Belichick's knowledge of, ability, experience with negotiating and handling the personalities of paid NFL players, I'm not saying that there is zero benefit to that at the college football level. I'm saying it's an entirely different circumstance. It is one thing for Rob Brown to have wonderful experience of hosting a local sports talk radio show. It is entirely different animal when I sit in on Saturdays and host a nationally syndicated show, or if I get called in to go nationally syndicated on the weekdays. At its core, it's the same principle. But the way that it is handled and where the power lies and who calls the shots, that's an entirely different world. And the experience is incredibly valuable. I'm not arguing. But the experience is only going to carry you so far when you enter a different structure that has an entirely different power dynamic. And I think the power dynamic of college players against college programs is just wildly different than NFL players against NFL programs. But again, we'll find out. Like has been pointed out, and I think you illustrated with the girlfriend thing wonderfully a few minutes ago, great one. All of this being the primary conversation about North Carolina. Not Gio Lopez, not Peyton Pesor, not any of the wide receivers or the 3 returning offensive linemen or the 2 returning defensive starters at whole and as many as 8 or 9 transfers having to start for UNC. None of that's the discussion. The discussion is Bill's girlfriend and his NFL mentality, and I think that's by design from Bill Belichick to enter the 2025 ACC football season as maybe the biggest wild card in the bunch. And I think that maybe he is. Coming up in the next hour of the show, we will flip our conversation over to Dave Doeren and NC State. Are they a rival for Clemson? I mean, I know Dave Doeren has been kind of a rival for Dabo, whether Dabo admits it or not. We know the conversations, the barbs that they have traded, and I think that those have been interesting over the years. But is NC State a rival for Clemson this year? Obviously, they will not match each other in the regular season, but there is, or is there, question mark, a chance that these two teams could line up in the ACC championship? Is there a chance that NC State could impact the ACC's final two teams? We will talk about that coming up in the next hour of the show. And though he doesn't know it yet, Cole Bryson made the mistake of showing up early. So for the first time in a couple of weeks, Cole's going to come on our show, and we'll get his thoughts on the ACC, the SEC, college football at large, and more. All that coming up in the next hour of the show. Now, if they handed out trophies, championship trophies for reading sports flashes, Lonzo would be the Bill Belichick of sports flashes. He's not 73, though, just to be clear.
I'm also the king of trolls. Spencer Strider took his 8th loss of the year. As the Braves fell to the Giants 9-3, Strider went 5 innings, giving up just 5 hits and 3 runs while striking out 7. Justin Verlander improved his record to 1-8 for the Giants with the win. The Braves had 7 hits but didn't score their first runs until the 7th inning, already down 9-0. Shohei Ohtani homered in his 5th straight game for the Dodgers last night, tying a franchise record for consecutive games with a home run. Ohtani now leads the NL with 37.
You know, we've had the bacon discussion on the show many times.
Yeah, I was trying to throw some stuff in there so you can finish your bacon, dude.
I'm going to tell you, floppy bacon, crispy bacon. The debate will rage on throughout the eons of human history and into our future.
There is no debate. There's just you and the floppy bacon.
The debate over floppy bacon, crispy bacon, and I know that there will be a debate because it's been debated at this event like 3 times that I'm aware of so far on different shows. The debate rages on into eternity.
Wow. Did you instigate this?
I did not. No, it's
Okay.
because there's breakfast.
As an advocate for floppy bacon that you are.
I'm 100% an advocate for floppy bacon.
Surprised you don't have a floppy bacon T-shirt.
I'm a floppy bacon guy. I don't know what to tell you. I do not want to bite into a slab of bacon that turns into shards of glass and assaults the inside of my mouth like the beaches of Normandy, man.
For those at home, Rob does not eat an entire slab of bacon.
I mean, yeah, for sure. No, I definitely.
He would, and he could. I don't know if he could. Actually, I don't think I get. I mean, how much is a slab of bacon? That's
Like
a lot.
I don't know. I'd say a slab's what, like a pound and a half of bacon.
Oh no, it's more than that. I gotta look. That
whatever a package of bacon from the grocery store is, I just always assume that's a slab. I'll eat that. I will 100% cook and eat an entire package of bacon from the grocery store. I hope my doctor's not listening because I assume that's bad for you. What I will say is Team Floppy Bacon, Team Crispy Bacon, there is a neutral ground in the middle for all of us, which I think we are all on, which is Team Free Bacon. Big fan of just a big old pot sitting in the middle of the breakfast buffet. Just mounded over with bacon and a take as much bacon as you would like sign.
Yeah, I agree with you. A whole smoked pork belly before it's sliced into familiar bacon strips is considered a slab. So can you eat a whole pork belly?
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Wouldn't stop me from trying.
Believe it or not, even with the weight gain, cannot eat a pork belly, an entire one.
Wouldn't stop me from trying.
I bet Cole spits whole pigs over a fire when he's out, fishing. You should ask him that.
I would not be shocked. We are going to ask him that.
And picks a fresh apple off of a tree, sticks it in the pig's mouth.
None of that would shock me. None of that would shock me, and we're going to find out because Cole Bryson's going to join the show coming up here in just a few minutes, whether he wants to or not, because he made the mistake of not just rolling up in here, but rolling up here in maybe the most over-the-top floral shirt I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it is.
Wait, he's not wearing station gear?
No, Cole Bryson rolls up 2 days in a row. Cole Bryson rolls up in here with a suit. Like he's either trying to sell me a car or a Bible, and I can't tell which one it is.
Why
maybe
not
both
both
at the same time? Yeah, maybe a car with a Bible in it. Rolling up here in a suit, looking GQ fly. But he rolled up in here today, Lonzo, with a shirt. I'm gonna have to take a picture and send you here in a minute.
Shoes? Is he?
I don't know. What's the shoe game called? Right? Yeah, come on.
What are those?
On the air in a minute. But
what are those shoes that make you taller called?
Look at this. I'm gonna even go one step further. I'm gonna actually have to illuminate.
Wait, he's not wearing a hat. That's weird.
Look at the vibrancy of the colors on this shirt for one Cole Bryson. It is.
You're
shocking,
jealous. You're
shocking.
jealous.
I am jealous.
Yeah,
I am jealous.
It
has always been my game to be the loudest fashionista in the. You know what? Just screw it. Walk over here.
Oh, he's unbuttoning. Oh no.
I would.
We're getting a show now.
I would, but the shirt says Rob on it, and that would put you in a weird spot. Put you in a weird spot.
Oh no, he could pretend to be you. You just have to yell.
Just yell a bunch. That is also quite fair. You know what? Let's just go ahead and do it. Let's just get CB. Which one of these headsets are you on? Is it this one?
This one.
There it is. There it is. What's up, big fella? How's ACC Media Days treating you?
It's good, man. I think it's a little busier than last year from what I've seen. There was at times there were some dead spots last year. I mean, like dead. But I don't know. This year, I've enjoyed it a lot more. This year, seems like a lot more people here.
It does seem busier than it was on day one, and obviously day one, like. Miami was interesting. SMU was in that ACC championship game last year. Day one was a little bit slower. I expected it would pick up. Thursday's always the busiest day with Dabo, and I think this year with Bill Belichick being here as well, like the folks who were only going to come to a day or two were always going to come to day three. So I don't disagree. Let me get your thoughts on this because I said earlier in the week, the more that I really kind of dive into the teams in the ACC this year. SMU was in the playoff last year. A lot of people arguing at 10-2. Miami should have been. That Georgia Tech loss might have been the worst loss in all of college football. Brent Key at Georgia Tech. That's an 8-win football team that was a field goal away from being 9 last year. Bill Belichick at North Carolina, huge question mark. Wake Forest has got a new coach. I don't think they'll be in the mix. Jeff Brom at Louisville. You and I were both talking yesterday about how much we like that team. The more I look at this conference, this is not an argument that it's anywhere as near as good as the Southeastern Conference, which I don't think it nor the Big Ten are. I honestly think the ACC, as in entire conference, the ACC might be closer to the Big Ten than we've given it credit for. In or out on that?
The ACC might be closer to the Big Ten.
Yeah,
Big
not
Ten.
not as close as far as Ohio
Hot
State, Penn
take.
State at the top.
Hot take.
Well,
Hot take.
It might be a hot take. The Big Ten, I think, is a little top heavy, and
Sure.
the ACC, when you look at top heaviness, I see one, and then I see a bunch of others. So, like, for example, when I voted this morning on my projected order of the finish in the ACC, Rob, I think 2 through 7 is really tight.
Give me your 2 through 7.
2 through 7.
Spoiler alert.
Miami.
Okay.
At 2.
Yep.
Louisville at 3.
Okay.
You and I talked about them. High on them. SMU at 4. Georgia Tech at 5. Florida State at 6. And North Carolina at 7. That's 2 through 7. And I think between the 2 and the 7, I don't think the margins. You remember how last week I asked you about mileage between in the SEC when we're looking at your
and I
SEC?
said, 3 through 11
Sure.
are all one group there.
And I think 2 through 7-ish are pretty tight, just because you could argue that Georgia Tech could finish ahead of SMU. You could argue that SMU could finish ahead of Louisville, right? You could argue that Florida State might surprise people and finish neck and neck or higher than Georgia Tech. That wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. So Clemson, to me, when you compare the conferences, they're at the top. But I think there's some heavy foot traffic. There's a lot of there's a logjam for me 2 through 7.
What's the step back? Because I don't necessarily have a pushback on any of that, other than I don't think North Carolina is going to be there. But as we've talked about quite a bit, that's a wild card. That's a mystery team. What is the step back for you with SMU? Because I love Rhett Lashley as a coach. He won me over last year at this event. Kevin Jennings is an absolute dog. I'm a big fan of what that cat is capable of. I know they lost some talent. I think, 2 or 3 of their running backs all took off, either graduated or transferred, but they got a handful of young dudes that Rhett Lashley has talked up quite a bit. So maybe the run game's a step back, but what is it about SMU for you that a team that went to the ACC title game last year, a team that forced Clemson to go on a gutted-out drive and kick a walk-off field goal, why have they taken such a step back? Or is that such a step back in your opinion?
Again, I don't know that it's a huge step back. It might be a step back when you look at the rankings, right? I think up front, Rob, when you look at this conference, Clemson for the last decade or so has dominated because they've had great coaches. They've had great guys on the outside. They've had really good running backs. But when you are able to, in the ACC, really move bodies, when you're able to dominate, in the run game, offensive line, defensive line, I think you're able to finish second in the conference like SMU did last year. I don't know that losing 3 starters from last year's team on the offensive line for SMU, I don't know that that's going to fare well for them in 2025. I will tell you this, they bring back 7 starters offensively, 5 defensively, so it's not like they're starting over. And I actually do like Rhett Lashley. I think he's done a great job. However, I just don't know that Rhett Lashley is there yet to have this team consistently finishing second in the ACC when you do have quarterbacks out there who have transferred in, like the likes of Carson Beck, who I think will make a big push. And then the last thing I'll say is schedule. Have you looked at their schedule? I mean, by the way, I said yesterday, are we sure that Miami's even in the ACC? Miami doesn't play Clemson. Miami doesn't play – let's see. They don't play Clemson. They don't play there was one other big team here. They don't play Louisville. So Miami, Rob, doesn't play Louisville or Clemson. So to answer your question, SMU schedule. Why I picked Miami ahead of SMU. SMU has, in the ACC, Miami. They also have Clemson. I could see them,
and Louisville, by the way.
I could see them dropping 2 or 3, if not all 3 of those. Is that a disrespect to Rhett Lashley? No. But the conference schedule with Clemson, Miami, 2 to 3 weeks, and then you mentioned Louisville toward the end of the season. I think they drop those. Look at Miami's schedule, Rob. Guess who Miami doesn't play? They don't play Clemson. Miami has, for the second year in a row, they don't play Clemson. So I just think when it comes to scheduling, 2, 3, 4 was really tight for me. And I actually, this morning when I voted, I actually looked at the schedules and said to myself, who do they play? Who do they not play? Miami's plus 440 to finish second in the ACC. So I just think Miami has the easier road.
I have talked about this team a lot. In fact, I was on with you guys earlier this week on Tuesday from day one. And Diesel asked me the question, if they couldn't get it done last year with Cam Ward, is an SEC quarterback coming to the ACC enough to get it done? And my response at the time was, I get it that we want to pump the SEC and all that, and that's all great. We're going to pretend like Cam Ward wasn't the number 1 overall draft pick in the NFL. Yeah. So my response was, this isn't about the quarterback in Miami. It's about the coaching staff. It's about Mario Cristobal. It's about the fact that once they lost that game to Georgia Tech last year, that they had no business losing. They had a 100% chance of winning that game, and then they lost that game. It was the most snatched defeat from the jaws of victory moment in the history of college football. I said to Diesel on Tuesday, and I want your thoughts on it, if Miami can't get it done this year, with all the talent they have, with the fact that they're throwing around a $4.2 million NIL package to get Carson back down there, et cetera, if they can't get it done this year, I think I got to be done with Mario Cristobal. Yeah. Because the schedule sets up well. You were exactly correct. I look at Clemson's schedule, and I'm going to ask you about this if you'll stick around for maybe one more segment, but this is a team that's got wild card North Carolina at BC, trap game, because then they got SMU, Duke, Florida State, and Louisville. That's about as tough of a 6-week run as you're going to find on this schedule.
For Clemson, right?
For Clemson.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Everything sets up well for Miami. I genuinely believe if they don't get it done this year, and if we can pinpoint a dumb decision or two from Cristobal that cost them a game or two, I think it's time to kind of blow the whole thing up and start over at Miami, no matter how good the roster looks.
No, I'm with you, and that's why I picked them second. Because outside of that Notre Dame game, Rob, look at the schedule outside of Notre Dame and Florida, right? What matters? Conference games. Florida State, Louisville, and then after that, they're cruising. They have Stanford, SMU, Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. I think Miami, they bring back 15 of 22 starters, by the way. Yeah. 15 of 22. You add in Carson back. I agree with what you said about Cam Ward. He at times I felt like had to do a little bit more just because of what he was working with. I don't think they were uber talented at core positions last season. But no, if they don't get it done this year, I'll tell you this. If they trip early against Florida State or Louisville, I think right there is the beginning of the end, because throwing out Notre Dame, throwing out Florida, they might lose those games. You never know. But in conference, they should be able to, with 15 of 22 starters returning, you should be able to beat Florida State and Louisville. Louisville's a good team. I like Jeff Brom a lot.
So do I.
Miller Moss is going to be good, I think. I don't think Miller Moss is going to have the weapons around them that Miami does and the transfers that Miami has coming in. But no, they absolutely have to deliver, and I think they do. I think early on, especially those non-conference games that I just talked about, you'll know then, Rob, in my mind, whether or not they'll be able to go win the conference. Is that fair to say? By the 20th of September, and that's early in the season, by the way, by the 20th of September, you'll know if Miami can win the conference, even though they haven't played a conference game, because they have played Notre Dame and they have played Florida.
I think we'll get a good vibe. I for one, and I think I said this to you last week, I'm 100% bought in on the DJ Lagway hype train now. Like, after what I saw from that kid on the field last year and the absolute masterclass he put on as far as handling himself at SEC Media Days, I'm all in on the DJ Lagway hype train at this point. I think Florida could be a genuinely a surprise national championship contender this year. I think a lot of people have kind of wanted to hang the blame for the slow progression on Billy Napier to some degree. And I'm fine with that, to be honest, because Napier, much like, and there's two more teams I want to ask you about if you'll hang around for maybe one more segment and talk with us. Napier's one of those guys I think has had a lot of blame hung on him, but I also think he took over after the last couple of years when he got there. First off, he had to put on some big boy boots because it's a big step up from Louisiana to get over to Gainesville, Florida, but the hype and the expectation. Learning curve's fine for a lot of guys. But I also think there was a lot of young talent he brought with him and onto that program, and we're kind of starting to see fruits. I think that Florida team could be very good this year, which makes not just Miami better, but they've also got, as you pointed out, Florida State, who, if North Carolina is the biggest wild card this year in the ACC, I got to think Florida State's right there with them at number 2.
I like that, but let me ask you this question. Look at Miami's schedule. Let's say their first conference game is Florida State, right?
Yep.
Let's say they win that game. I think they win that game, don't you?
Sure.
Today, if we had to pick today, I think Miami wins that game, even though it's at Doak. They have a bye. Well, this is why I like them. This is why I like them to finish second. They play Florida State. That could be a wild card to your point, right? However, Rob, think about this. They have a bye before Florida State. Look at that schedule. They have Florida, then a bye. So they have 2 weeks to prepare for Florida State, which they'll win that game. 2 weeks to prepare for Louisville because they have another bye. They have 2 byes in 3 weeks.
Yep.
And I think when you look at the ACC, nobody's schedule sets up as good as Miami's because they have a bye before Florida State, which could potentially be a trap game on the road. They have a bye before Jeff Brom, which I think gives them an upper hand advantage, right? And then guess what? After you beat Jeff Brom, you got to go beat Stanford, SMU. That'll be tough. In Dallas, by the way. But after that, you have to beat Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. My point being, if they do beat Louisville on the 18th of October, we might be able to say on your show and my show that Miami's going to be in the ACC
ball game, wrap it up. Yeah,
right?
No, I don't disagree.
It's going to be Clemson-Miami. That Louisville game is going to tell us a lot.
Yeah, I agree. All right, when we come back here in just a minute, Cole going to stick with us for one more segment. I do want to ask about Jeff Brom and Louisville. I do want to talk about Florida State and what we heard out of Mike Norvell yesterday because I've got a thought from the presser that he gave upstairs that I want to run by you. We'll get his thoughts on North Carolina, the rest of the ACC. Cole Bryson from Wire to Wire live this afternoon from 3 to 7, but he made the mistake of coming in early, so he's sitting in for one more segment. Rob Brown, the Great with Lonzo, and you. The Rob Brown Show rolls on from ACC Media Days, day number 3 in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends at Ingles. This is the Fan Upstate.
QC.
All right, guys, stay right there. We'll be right back.
love the savings.
I'm a fan of State.
Okay, vibes. Hashtag vibes.
This is for Cole's shirt.
Ah, dude, it fits. It fits.
It does. I like it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rob Brown Show on your radio live and on location for the final day of ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. We appreciate them stepping up to the plate and being a corporate sponsor so that we could, be here and do this, which is fantastic.
Helps.
Yeah, it makes
It does
life
help.
easier. All right, let's get to a couple of teams we haven't really gotten a chance to talk about here. Let's start with North Carolina. They're coming up here today. They are one of the first teams on the actually one of the last teams on the docket here at ACC Media Days. I'll just open-end it. We talked earlier about the fact that we don't really know a lot about North Carolina. They've kept this season under wraps, which is very Belichickian of them. Where do you land on the heels this year?
I think there's so much being made, Rob, of Belichick being there.
Sure.
And I've overreacted. I've had knee-jerk reactions. And the more I think about it, and this isn't the fun hot take, but the more I think about it, I don't know that North Carolina is going to be much different than what we've seen in the past 5 years.
Sure.
I just don't know that Belichick coming in is going to revitalize this program in a way that gets them to Charlotte, to here, to play just down the road in Bank of America Stadium. I just don't know that one guy, even though that one guy's a Hall of, like, the best to ever do it, because that does matter. Not saying coaching don't matter, but I don't know that one guy coming in is enough to overhaul a program in a way. And how many months? 9 months, 8 months that he's been there. I just my feel is that North Carolina in 2025, will they be a game better? Maybe. I just don't know that they're going to look a lot different than what we've seen in the past few years.
So is this long term then? I mean, is this something you think Belichick's? He's 73 years old. Is he still there in 2 years at 75 competing for a title, or is this a hand it over to Steve in a year or two thing?
I don't see him there 3 years. Do you?
Okay.
I mean, 3 more years. Is he here in Charlotte in 2028?
Yeah.
Doing
at
this?
76.
I don't know. I don't think so. And I think handing it to a son, even though it's a likelihood, I think it could be another mistake. Not saying that Steve doesn't know football. I just think that North Carolina has better options out there. I said at the very beginning that, I know this is crazy, but I said at the very beginning that Jamie Chadwell was a better option than Bill Belichick. Just for what that program needs, the direction they need to go, college athletics, the direction college athletics are going. I don't think that's a popular take, but I also don't think that Bill Belichick is going to come in year one and just, flip over tables. I don't think it's going to happen.
All right, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, would you have said the same thing that you're saying right now about Belichick?
10, 20 years ago, if he came to college?
Yeah. Is this just strictly about his age?
I think it's about the fact that once we saw Tom Brady leave the New England Patriots, it was the most stagnant offense that I've ever seen a Bill Belichick team have. And does his age, Lonzo, factor into it? Yeah, it does factor into it. Is it the end-all, be-all? I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. You can still be old and coach and win games. I think that's still allowed, right? But I just don't know that, like, when you look at what –
Well, for most of us.
Yeah. What did he do without Tom in the NFL that leads us to believe that he can come to college at an older age, to your point, Lonzo, and all of a sudden flip these tables over and have this program contending for an ACC championship? Maybe I'm skeptical. I just don't know that North Carolina is going to be much improved. Maybe
listen, a matter of stamina. He obviously has plenty of that.
I would, I would, as far as the age thing, I find myself in the middle. If you can do it, you can do it. Nick Saban, I believe, was 69 when he won his last title in 2020. He was like 68, 69 years old, and he was the oldest. But I would also say, Nick Saban was also in college football for 1,000 years before he became Nick Saban, and he was in college football and I know he did some time in the pros, but he wasn't Bill Belichick. It's you know what it is? It's the inverse to me. It is Nick Saban going to the Dolphins and everybody going, look at all these national championships he's won, and has been trophy winners, and he's done this and he's done that, and he's got the football mentality. He can go up a level and get it done. It's a different game of football. Nick Saban got to the NFL. Now, in fairness, maybe we're telling a different story if the Miami Dolphins training staff says, no, actually, we kind of like this Drew Brees guy, and they don't saddle him with Dante Culpepper. Yeah. But regardless of how it played out, Saban got to the NFL, and it did not work. And then he came back to college football, and he started whipping everybody's ass again. And once that happened, like, it's just this to me is the exact mirror image.
By the way, not trying to hog, time with Cole, but I relish my time with Cole.
I know how much you guys love each other.
Yeah, well, we do. Absolutely. If NIL doesn't exist, and if wait a minute, let me make sure that I say it right. Shared revenue
there it is.
Doesn't exist. Is Belichick coaching college this year?
I don't know that he is. I think you're looking at Rob, and tell me if you disagree. I think Belichick realizes that he has the opportunity to two things: be in the ACC, which helps, right? And number two, use, to Lonzo's point, NIL and portal to quickly build a franchise like you kind of can do in the NFL. Because pre all of this, it's going to take 5-6 years to build a program. At North Carolina, he simply doesn't have that time on the back end, right? And again, for me, it's simple. Why are we as media overhyping this in a way that we kind of lose focus? I'm not saying Vegas is the end-all, be-all by any means, but they're plus 4,000 to win the conference. And again, they're not always right. There are a lot of times Vegas is wrong. But I can tell you this. If North Carolina is plus 4,000 to win the ACC, Vegas knows something. And that's why I kind of land on, I don't know that they're going to look much different.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. Let's talk very quickly about Mike Norvell and the Florida State Seminoles. They were here yesterday. I kind of put them in that same category with North Carolina as a wild card team because a team that can 2 years ago go 13-0, win this conference outright, get bounced from the playoffs, I still think inappropriately, but the past is the past, then turn around the next year and go 2-10 with a roster that had no business being 2-10 with some dumb losses mixed in there. I really don't know. I would like to say it's a bounce back season for Florida State. I also don't know what's a bounce back season. Is it 6-6 and be bowl eligible? Is it 8-4? Is it 10-2 and backdoor your way into the title game? Is it 11-1 and like clearly get in? I don't know what the answer is. Here's what I will say. I listened to Mike Norvell yesterday at his press conference upstairs. And for a guy that the last really 2 years coming into the last two ACC media days, when Mike Norvell spoke, it was it had a presence to it. And it wasn't what it was yesterday. It was the last couple of years, it was, I'm Mike Norvell. I'm the head coach of the Florida State Seminoles. We're excited to play football next year. We got these guys coming in and we're running this and we got these guys yesterday. And I said this yesterday to you when I was sitting here listening to the audio. I didn't even cut anything out of it because it was just all rah-rah, shish boom bah coaching cliches. And Mike Norvell to me sounded like, I don't know how else to put it. I don't mean this any kind of way. He sounded like a Bible thumping pastor 100%. on a street corner trying to get people to come to church.
After he just won a CMA, you know.
Yeah, it was
weird.
It was weird. Like I listened to it as somebody who again, covered this guy the last 2 years running and thought this is a guy who's got his bleep together running this program. I listened to him yesterday and I described it as a guy standing in the middle of an inferno yelling everything's okay. It didn't click with me. I don't know what to make of this team.
So Florida State, sometimes even like at the high school level, sometimes it takes 3 or 4 weeks into the season to know what you are. You know what I mean? Even sometimes in the NFL, most of the time in high school and college, depending on the schedule, right? Sometimes it's October before you know what your team has. Sure. Florida State's going to know August the 30th. You know what I mean?
Alabama coming to the crib.
Here's the reality of it. Alabama is one of the top 5 teams in the country. And when you look at this Florida State team in 2025, yeah, they have Miami. Yeah, they have Clemson. And they don't have Louisville on the schedule, which is a big plus in conference. But we're going to know right off the bat. What are we less than a month away now? We're going to know real quick if this Florida State team is still in the same boat they were last year. So going back to your improvement point, they brought back 15 of 22 starters, which you would look at paper and think that's good. But the problem with that is, like, when we look on paper and say, they brought back 16 of 22 starters.
From a 2-10 team.
2-10 team. Yeah. So is that a good thing? And I know they got some portal guys in, at different positions. I think a couple of guys at the wide receiver position in the portal. But I just don't know that Florida State, 2-10 last year, I always look at it through this lens. Were they truly as bad as 2-10? Because their record, you are what your record says you are. They were 2-10.
Yeah.
Were they that bad, or were they a little bit closer to what Mike Norvell was in his first season at Florida State? Because what is this, his sixth year there now? So I just think 2-10 is a terrible record. We all know that. We can, anybody can look and say 2-10 is not good, but I don't know that they were 2-10 bad from the talent they had on the field.
This team last year to me felt very much like a team that almost kind of served as the poster child for those who have been warning of the dangers of leaning on the portal and NIL,
sure,
right? Because you had a
yeah.
bunch of guys in there like Peyton Turner and these other defensive guys that were all transfers in, all got the bag. And there were reports coming out of Tallahassee that they'd go get the floor wiped with them by Boston College, and the music would be playing in the locker room and the lights would be going and the dancing 5 minutes after an L. And it's like,
sure.
I'm not one of these cats that says, like, if you're a player, if you take an L, it's got to eat at you for months and months and months. I am saying, like, if you just go, oh, well, got paid, like, that's not great. That's not a great look, and that's a problem for a team that was expected last year. Again, 9 months removed from 13-0 and should have been in the playoffs. I don't know how you go from 13-0 to 2-10, no matter what. So when I was listening to him yesterday, again, hoping for the sake of the conference and good football, FSU's going to have a bounce back here. Mike Norvell said nothing yesterday.
Yeah.
It was just all platitudes and coaching cliches. And again, he doesn't have to, nor does Belichick or Rhett Lashley or anybody. But when I listen to Rhett Lashley, who was up there pumping up his guys, Dabo's going to do the same about his defensive guys. When Norvell gets up there and it's just platitudes and cliches for 10 minutes, it's like, what are we doing?
You know what I learned, though? You said something interesting there. How do you go from, was it 13-0?
13-0 to
2-10. I think we're learning. How do you do it? Well, it happens in the NFL. I think that we're learning, Rob, in this new era of college athletics. We always hear, you and I hear, that the NFL is more of a year-to-year league than any other sports league out there. College football is heading in the direction of the NFL, as we all know, right? With players getting paid, not contracts, but agreements, not being there the next year. I think we're learning that college football is becoming a year-to-year league in itself. And if you don't have a Dabo Swinney program, if you don't have a Fran Brown, I'm not saying Fran Brown's done what Dabo's done, but if you don't have that program in place, you're simply flipping the switch, and it's a new slate, new team, new year. Doesn't matter who the coaching staff is. It really don't. Like, if you don't have the dudes in there that want to play, like you said, it is a clean – you're literally every year wiping the slate clean. So I think we're going to learn a lot about Mike Norvell, even maybe more so this year than we did last year. How does he bounce back from 2-10?
Cole Bryson and his shirt and mustache will be live with you all this afternoon from 3 to 7 p.m. on Wire to Wire, along with Diesel, who I assume is going to show up at some point.
Diesel will show up at some point. Yep. Yeah, I don't know if he's
about
early rising. I was up at 5:30 this morning. I went up as early as you. What time did you wake up?
I was in this building at 5:15 this morning.
Okay.
I was a little late this morning. I was here at 5:15. I had to check out of the hotel at 3:45.
Okay.
I hated you and everybody else around that time.
You should. It's funny, in the mornings you hate everything.
Yeah.
Like, you hate your job, you hate your life, you hate everything.
I don't hate Lonzo. I love Lonzo.
But no, that early in the morning you do.
I beg to differ on that. But anyway.
All right,
man, appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Cole Bryson, Wire to Wire, 3 to 7 this afternoon here on the Fan Upstate, live from ACC Media Days. We got to run to a break. We'll come back here in just a minute. We'll follow up with some thoughts on everything we just talked about with Cole. We'll take a look at some of the other teams that are on the docket today: Boston College, Virginia Tech, Duke, NC State, North Carolina, and, of course, the Clemson Tigers rolling up into town. We did an analytical deep dive on the Clemson schedule earlier this week, and I gave you some games I think could be trouble spots. We will address those a little bit more at length, plus some conversations from Big Ten Media Days and a segment where I talk about not college football, because there's other sports too. It's all coming up on the Rob Brown Show, live from ACC Media Days, presented by our friends at Ingles Supermarkets. This is the Fan Upstate.
From the 20. Local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
I'm a fan upstate.
The Rob Brown Show back on your radio here in Charlotte, North Carolina, home of ACC Media Days. Day 3, the final day of ACC's propaganda extravaganza taking place. We have seen some of the coaches and teams start to make their way into the building. We had this conversation last week. I want to have it. I don't want to have a conversation. I'm just curious as to your thoughts. 844-326-3663. I ran a Twitter poll on this last week at SEC Media Days, but the suit with sneakers look like that's just kind of taken over. It's become the vibe. All the players, all the coaches, they're all showing up. Carson Beck rolled up on Tuesday for Miami's Day in a very dope green suit, and he had on black sneakers that had been customized. That were they were all black, but like the front of them had like the punk spikes on the, you know what I'm talking about, Zoe, like the punk spikes that the punks put on the leather vest and stuff like that.
When you're saying punk, I think you need to explain further. You're talking about like punk rock type.
Yeah,
thing.
like punk, right? Like the punk rock spiky look. Like he had tennis shoes with his suit, but
like they would look good,
spikes.
like they would look right on boots.
Yeah, like if the Sex Pistols played a show.
There you go.
And they made a whole outfit out of Carson Beck shoes.
I don't know. I don't know what a recent punk band would be to where you could, more relate to the
really
youths.
think there's a lot of like true punk bands anymore. There's a lot of pop punk, and don't get me wrong, Rob Brown's absolutely a pop punk guy. Fight me, I'll go to town with some good Charlotte, no question. But there's not really a lot of true punk bands anymore. At least they are. If there are, they've remained super underground, which makes sense because if you want widespread play, you kind of got to be corporate in 2025 America. So
then you're not a true punk band.
Then
True punk band would not, right. Would not be commercial. Although is it commercial being on Spotify? As far as the tennis shoes look, I don't have a problem with that, or sneakers or whatever you want to call them. I think that's kind of cool. They're comfortable, and but I am curious though. So you've seen the shoe game at the ACC, and now at the SEC. Now you've seen it at the ACC. Who's got the better shoe game? And also, are the coaches rocking that look?
The coaches are primarily rocking that look. I will say, as far as the coaches go, Mack Brown had the strongest shoe game of any coach in college football for a long time. But of course, anybody who goes to North Carolina, I'm very curious to see what the hoodie rolls up in today.
I mean, you were talking about Lane Kiffin last week.
Lane Kiffin had on the Gucci sneaks that we looked at were $1,100 sneakers.
Yep.
We found out. Tony Elliott this week. Now, Tony, I will say, I did get a glimpse. He had on a pair of sneaks, black sneaks, that were very similar looking to Lane Kiffin's, but I couldn't get close enough to determine if they were Gucci or if they were Prada. They were designer, but I couldn't quite get close enough to determine like what brand they were. I need to go look through the portal photos, not transfer portal, but the media portal the ACC has launched with the photos to see if I could figure it out. The last couple of years, Tony Elliott has showed up in either AF1s or something similar that were customized. In fact, last year, he showed up with a pair of hand-painted AF1s that were freaking nasty, dude. Like Virginia colors with the logos on both sides. He had the mascot on one side. They were super sick. This year, more like kind of straight designer, which was a bit disappointing. But I'm curious as to where the majority of the listeners in the upstate are. We team suits with sneaks? Because I pointed it out last week, and I got like a handful of people who immediately were like, "Yo, no, that ain't it. That's not classy. Like you're dressing down the suit, whatever."
So, what were the demographics of the people who said
I don't know.
no?
It was on the text line, so it was relatively mundane. So I don't know is the answer to that. The folks that I do know that are anti sneaks with suits are primarily a little bit older than me, right? Like guys that are upwards maybe 50s, 60s. The young cats are very clearly pro sneaks with suits, and I will tell you, it's won me over. I did the AF1s with my wedding suit, and I've got to the point now that the one or two times since September that I've had to wear a suit, I have converted to sneaks with suit guy. I think it's become accepted enough as a look that you can get away with it. But I'm looking now at some of the players rolling in, and it's like every player is suit with sneaks guy now.
Is this showing off your payday, or is this a matter of cool?
I don't know, but I think it's both, right? Like, I think it's both because I think if you are going to go sneaks with suit, I think they got to be, for lack of a better term, I think they got to be dress sneaks, right? Like, I think they got to be AF1s, they got to be Jordans, they got to be upper end, Adidas or whatever. Like, I don't think like Sambas, like a good pair of custom Sambas would work with a suit. I think you've got to go elevated suit. Like, I don't think you can get away with sneaking suits if you're rocking like the New Balance dad kicks, right? Like,
I was going to say I think that is the punk rock of that look is to go with dad shoes because everybody else is not. I'm sure Cole is rocking the dad shoes right now.
No, Cole's got on dress shoes, and he's got fancy custom designer have like a textured pattern on the top wingtips. Oh, that's not alligator. He said alligator and alligator. He's got on.
I believe
nice
him. It's alligator.
But Cole Bryson's he's like the oldest young guy I know. You know what I mean? Like, he's like the oldest young guy.
By the way, he's always been like that.
No, I'm sure.
So yeah.
I'm sure he's the oldest young guy.
I've known him for a while, and he's just there's nothing wrong with that.
No, if you go,
it's the old soul type thing.
Yeah, if you go suit and dress shoes, I'm absolutely for it. I'm also pro sneaks with suit. Like, it has won me over. Now, again, I think you got to have a nice pair of sneaks. I don't think you can just roll like generic. Like, I'll keep it a buck. Great one. I picked up the all white sneaks. I got these from Target. They were like $18 because they go with the white shirt and the blue pants.
They're slip-ons, aren't they?
No, they're okay. Laced. They're ties.
Okay. All right.
I do still go fashionista where I tuck the laces inside.
All right.
The shoe
This
and
is
tie 'em.
People on the radio can't see this, but Rob took his shoe off in a public place and then stuck his hand inside of the shoe.
My legs are crossed.
But then you stuck your hand inside your shoe.
But no, I just touched the lace. I didn't touch the inside of the shoe. I'm not a barbarian.
Yeah. Okay.
But like, I picked these up, but these aren't getting rocked with a suit. These are getting rocked with, like, I have on blue golf pants and a white polo. I think you can dress that down.
Would pre-40 Rob ever have bought those shoes?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, he would not have. Pre-40 Rob would have dropped the $120 necessary to have a pair of all white Jordans or all white with maybe like a blue swoosh down the side. Our buddy Brandon, who works for the ACC, who has been our contact with this league for a very long time, he is a suit with sneaks guy, but the sneaks game is strong. That dude has had on now 3 days, 3 different pair of low top AF1s that are color tailored to the suit. Like, yesterday, he had on a dark Royal Navy suit with a white shirt, and the sneaks were low top AF1s that were all white with a blue swoosh and the blue trim around. Today, he's rocking a light gray suit, white shirt, gold tie, and the sneaks today are white AF1s with gray trim and a gold swoosh on them. Like, he's coordinated the whole thing. But my man in 3 days has probably rolled up in here in about $700 worth of custom kicks.
All right. For the powers that be, but that may be wondering why they're talking fashion, because there's a reason why they show the players when they walk in to the stadium to get ready to go for a game.
It's all the rage.
It's become a part of sports, and I'm curious, and I don't know if you can think back like this, but how much has that game, the shoe game and the suit game, went up since NIL?
That is a fair question that I would say I don't think all that much. And I do not know this for a fact. I've gotten the impression in years gone by that they're much like schools can provide, clothing to players, like branded apparel and whatnot. I get the impression over the years that, like, the schools take care of the suits, because if those players are coming here to represent the school, I have imagined that there was some sort of loophole or rule or whatever that allowed for the schools to provide the clothing, since this is an official trip representing the university. The suit game has not dropped off all that much. I'll tell you what has up the last couple of years. The jewelry game, the necklace, the chain game has been up. There was a cat yesterday that was from, I want to say, I don't remember, Louisville, I think, who had on a pendant on a chain as big around as my friggin' head. He had a pendant on, great one, that was a diamond-encrusted great white shark swimming towards you with the player's number in his mouth. So it was like a diamond-encrusted great white, like a front profile, swimming towards, closing the mouth around the player's number, all of it
That's
encrusted
cool.
in diamond. And I'm
That's
like,
very cool.
Yeah.
If you interview any player today who has a big chain, remind them to not take those into an MRI.
Yes, that's bad news.
Because you know that dude died last week.
I saw that because of the chain. Yeah,
because of a chain. Yeah, you don't want to do that. It's a big magnet.
Let's do this. Let's run to a break. When we come back here in the final hour of the show, we'll look through some of the other teams that are on deck today at SEC Media Days. We'll also give you I will ask for your assistance in putting together our projected order of finish in the conference. All of that and more coming up in the next hour of the radio program. Speaking of champions, if they handed out a championship trophy for Sports Flashes, Alonzo would have won all of them.
I have many accolades. Why not take another one? Spencer Strider took his 8th loss of the year as the Braves fell to the Giants 9-3. Strider went 5 innings, giving up just 5 hits and 3 runs while striking out 7. Justin Verlander improved his record to 1-8 for the Giants with the win. The Braves had 7 hits but didn't score their first runs until the 7th inning, already down 9-0. Shohei Ohtani homered in his 5th straight game for the Dodgers last night, tying a franchise record for consecutive games with a home run. Ohtani now leads the NL with 37 homers on the season. And the NFL's popularity and financial success were illustrated in public documents from the Green Bay Packers yesterday, saying they received league revenue sharing of $432.6 million. That's it. All right. I quit.
When it comes to the best sports talk,
the final day of ACC Media Days. So we have got 60 more minutes with you here on the show. And then, of course, we'll keep you in contact with everything happening here at Media Days throughout the rest of the day. Cole Bryson and Diesel will take over at 3 p.m. wire to wire, taking you until 7 o'clock this evening. They'll update you with everything that gets said today by the schools that are on the docket. Boston College under Bill O'Brien getting us kicked off here in about an hour. Brent Pry and Virginia Tech at 11. An hour later, Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers have their time in the sun. 1 to 1:30, Manny Diaz and the Duke Blue Devils, North Carolina under the hoodie, Bill Belichick from 2 to 2:30. And then Dave Doran and NC State take to the podium around 3 o'clock this afternoon. We have spent some time talking about all of the teams that are on the docket for today, as well as the rest of the ACC throughout the week, obviously. But there are a few more stories that I would like to get to before we wrap this bad boy up for the day. There is an interesting article up on Sports Illustrated right now, written by Pat Forty, who is obviously one of the mainstream voices in college football coverage, entitled, and what might obviously be the most, obviously titled headline of all time, Sources: Big Ten's four-bid college football playoff push tied to TV revenue proposal. We know. Here's the byline that 40 wrote. Quote, if Commissioner Tony Petitti's 4-4-2-2-1 model is adopted, the league could add 2 games alongside its title matchup for broadcast partners. Tony Petitti has been relatively established in the 4-4+ college football playoff extension model. He has been relatively established on his desire for the SEC and the Big Ten to each end the season with 4 automatic qualifications to the college football playoff. And apparently, according to Pat Forty, the reason why is that Petitti has made assurances to Big Ten broadcast partners and campus administrators that if there is a 4-4+ model, there would not only be the Big Ten championship game, but that the Big Ten would also select its other 2 spots, not by selecting the next 2 teams in the rankings, but number 1 and number 2 would both go. The 2 participants in the Big Ten championship game would both go. Then number 3 would play number 6. Number 4 would play number 5. Those 2 games would be hosted on the campuses of the higher seed, and the winner of those 2 games would advance to the college football playoff. Those games would obviously provide a lucrative postseason inventory that the Big Ten could sell to TV partners, and according to Petitti, they have already had that discussion. Of course, the SEC, as we have mentioned, is pivoted to a 4-4-2-2-1. The SEC has pivoted away from the 4-4-2-2-1 format and wanted to go to a 5+11. And the reason that I have said that I believe that is the case is very simple. I believe that is the case simply because the SEC will always get in 4, sometimes get in 5, and occasionally get in 6. The Big Ten, I have said for a while, I believe wants the 4-4+ model because they will likely always get in 4, but rarely, if ever, get in 5 or more, and could some years end up only getting in 3. And I think that they are trying to protect as many spots as they can. But apparently Tony Petitti has already been out there talking to television partners and saying, if we get the 4-4+ model, you will end up with 3 Big Ten postseason games. Not just 1, not just 2. You will end up with 3 postseason games. You will end up with the championship game, the 3-6 game, the 4-5 game, and that's how that will shake out. And I am genuinely curious, is this more because Tony Petitti has already recognized that he has and has already started selling that he has 2 more big-time college football games that he can sell, or is there something more to this if it is more along the conspiracy theory I was working with? Pat Forty has some very interesting quotes from, he claims, Big Ten sources that are involved in the conversation. If Petitti says, the article from Pat Forty says, if Petitti gets his play-in format, sources say a likely broadcast plan would call for Fox to air the Big Ten championship game with one of the play-in games on NBC and the other on CBS, the Big Ten's other primary broadcast partners. Neither Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark nor ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips are aligned with Petitti, although they have not openly expressed support of the 5+11 model. I have also pointed out, I do think that unless the Big Ten was to come to the Big 12 or the ACC with some sort of enormous award or compensation or something, that I do ultimately think the ACC and the Big 12 would likely agree with the SEC on the 5+11 model, just because it means that there are more spots available for ACC and Big 12 teams to earn. According to 40, Petitti lost the support of Greg Sankey for the 4 automatic bid premise in the spring. When Sankey's football coaches told him they wanted the 5+11 selections, the Big Ten has indicated it would only support such a format if the SEC increases its number of conference games from 8 to 9, as they have. One Big Ten source said of Tony Petitti, and this is interesting, as 40 is at B1G Media Days, quote, he's gotten way out over his skis. He's lost the room. The belief now is that Tony Petitti is officially the only commissioner that wants anything other than 16 teams and a 5+11 model. Now, like I've mentioned, I do think that there is the possibility out there that he could win support from the Big 12, win support from the ACC. It would obviously require him to probably award them something, give them some sort of additional compensation, whatever the case might be. But as of right now, neither Yormark nor Phillips has spoken out in support of Tony Petitti. Greg Sankey has obviously spoken out against Tony Petitti, meaning that the Big Ten, the second most powerful conference in college football right now, has a commissioner that is trying to shape the game and has nobody else in the game helping him to do that. This is a very interesting moment for college football, because if it does end up in a spot where the only one pushing for that 4+4 model is Tony Petitti in the Big Ten, and the SEC can indeed win over the ACC and the Big 12, they're going to get their way. In fact, I think the only way that the Big Ten would be able to get their way is for the Big Ten to get the ACC and the Big 12 on the same page with them, to get them to agree to the 4+4 model. But again, I think the Big Ten would have to come off some bargaining chips for that. And the question is, if they did that, would they lose ground to the SEC in any other places as well? And the answer is, I don't know, because we are at a point now where we are having to think a number of moves out ahead. I mean, this is some 4D chess stuff that is getting played now by the conference commissioners, by the conferences, by the media that are writing about all of this. So if what has just been said is accurate, that sources inside the Big Ten now believe that Tony Petitti may have overextended himself, may have pushed beyond where his power limitations, whatever, are currently accepted by the rest of the conferences. If Greg Sankey capitalizes on that and starts to push back, and if Phillips and Yormark were to join him, the Big Ten will basically be wrangled into submission to doing whatever the SEC wants them to do. Now, might that mean that they shift back from a 9 to an 8-game conference schedule? I don't know. Will they be able to talk the SEC into going to 9? I don't know. ACC Big 12 have made it relatively well known that they're not going to make any changes until they know the direction that they are headed in. They know the direction that they are going to be either pulled or rewarded for going. I don't know how all of that plays out yet, but I do know that this has got to be the most dramatic political game since like season 1 of Game of Thrones at this point. Like we got a full Jon Snow, Cersei situation playing out, in the college football landscape, and I genuinely do not know which angle it is going to ultimately take us in.
Well, which model makes the most money?
I mean, here's the thing. I think that I think that Tony Petitti in this spot has a valid point here. That valid point being, if we go 4-4 and we have 4 AQs, and the SEC could technically follow this model, if we go 4-4, what do you get out of the deal? You get 3 postseason games that exclusively belong to the Big Ten or the SEC or whoever, right? If you have a 3v6 and a 4v5 game, you can say, all right, we can now sell not only the Big Ten championship game, but we can sell 2 eliminators that determine who gets a ticket to the postseason. We can sell those games for more money. And hey, SEC, if you do that, you can do the same. But remember, we have worked out the numbers, and the rough estimate right now is that for every team that makes it to the playoff, conferences are getting like well north of $10 million. And then as you start to progress through the playoffs, you start to get exponentially more millions of dollars. So it is very possible that theoretically, if the SEC was to, as I think they would have last year if we had a 16-team bracket, if the SEC would have sent 6 teams last year, they could have made like up to the tune of hundreds plus of millions of dollars on sending teams to the playoffs. Would that outgain the Southeastern Conference having 1 championship game, 2 eliminator games to determine the 4 teams that are going? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what an individual eliminator Big Ten game is going to sell for to these networks to add into the contract, or a single eliminator SEC game would what's the market cost of that to the networks? I don't know the answer to that. And if I don't know the answer to that, then I think I have to roll the dice, because I know how much money I get for sending teams to the playoffs. And if the SEC is truly working on the belief that we will always send 4, regularly send 5, and sometimes send 6, I think they are going to think that it's going to average out to more than 2 additional postseason games being bought by a TV network every year. So the thought is absolutely correct. What is going to pay the most? Because that's the one that's going to win. But the answer is, I think, Lonzo, I think it'll pay more for the SEC to go 5+11. It'll pay more to the Big Ten to go 4-4-3-3 or 4-4-2-2. And the ACC and the Big 12 just go, like, whoever's going to give us the most, we're your supporter. They're like Lord Baelish in Game of Thrones. I'm getting deep with the Game of Thrones references, but trust me, they're all very good. I don't know is the answer. I think the reason the 2 leagues have their preferred format, I think the reason the 2 leagues have this standard that they wish to carry forward is because it will pay them individually as a league more than the other sides will. The SEC will make more at 5+11 because they will always send 4, regularly send 5, sometimes send 6. The Big Ten will usually send 4, sometimes send 3, maybe occasionally send 5. It just averages out. The SEC will send more teams, more years, which means more money for them. And I do think that is the line of demarcation in what all of this ultimately, and whatever direction we end up going with all of this at the end of this conversation, whatever it comes. There is only one for certain. There is only one for granted take that I have in all of this, which is we will definitely be at 16 teams next year. And if it costs Tony Petitti his job to get it to 16 teams, college football's got that kind of power to make that happen. All right, let's take a break. When we come back here in just a minute, I got a few more college football stories, a couple of non-sports stories, and you guys have lit up the text line and the Facebook chat. Join us on our live stream, facebook.com/TheFanUpstate, The Fan Upstate on Twitter and on YouTube, The Rob Brown Show on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitch. I'll read and respond to your comments and give you a few more college stories when we come back. The Rob Brown Show is live at the ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends at Ingles here on the Fan Upstate.
openers. We haven't won our openers the past 2 years. So we're trying to change that, get us going in the right direction, get us on the right path, start out strong, and hopefully like we win that game. That gives us a lot of confidence going into the rest of the season.
Antonio Williams of the Clemson Tigers here on the Rob Brown Show and the Fan Upstate. Talk to me about the young man throwing you the football this year, Cade Klubnik. Talk about a kid who since he took over at QB1, immense pressure to kind of be the next guy in a string of great quarterbacks at Clemson. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you've seen out of him in growth? We saw him, I think, get better by the week last week through the regular season, but there's a lot of pressure on him to be able to perform, be the quarterback in this league, be the quarterback that takes you guys back into national championship contention. Talk to me about what you've seen out of the signal caller this offseason.
I mean, I just think every year he gets better, and I mean that's all you can ask for. His preparation is just, I just really look up to him in that aspect, just like the way he prepares for each game, everything he's going through, all the film he's looking at. He's even trying to sit in meetings with coaches and see why they want to draw up this play, and what they see and how they think it will work. But that guy, no matter how much pressure he's had on him, he's never folded. So I always have confidence in him that he'll get the job done.
All right, last one. Best Madden player, or best college football player on the team. Best video game college football player on the team. Who is it?
Me.
Everybody says me. What do you have to back it up? Every player I've interviewed for 3 weeks has said it's me. What do you have to back it up?
If you look at my track record, recently I was just on stream playing against some streamer guy. I forgot his name, but first time on stream, and I didn't lose.
Did you get him?
Yeah, I got him. I ain't even gonna lie like that. I won the first game. He beat me the second game, but I got a lot of confidence in my game, and I haven't really met anyone that can consistently beat me. I might lose a game here and there, but I'll bounce back all the time.
I respect it. Antonio Williams of the Clemson Tigers, my man, great to talk to you. Thanks for coming by. Good luck this year. I know the eyes of South Carolina are going to be on y'all to see what you do. I wish you the best, man. Thank you very much. Antonio Williams of the Clemson Tigers joining us here on the Rob Brown Show and the Fan Upstate. Let's run to a break just a couple of minutes early. When we come back, we'll break down that discussion. We'll talk a little bit more Clemson as we wrap up our broadcast day. Day number 3 of ACC Media Days live in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's the Rob Brown Show on the Fan Upstate. dog Cole Bryson for bird hunting that one for us. We appreciate it very much. And, of course, thanks to Clemson for hooking that up. We will have some more sound for you throughout the day as we lead up to Wire to Wire with Cole Bryson and Diesel this afternoon from 4 until 7 p.m. So, 3 until 7 p.m. Make sure you tune in for that because we will have clipped audio. We have got Bill Belichick will be giving a speech later on. Manny Diaz and the Duke Blue Devils are in the house as well. Another one of those teams that, again, I certainly do not think that we are going to see, Duke in the ACC championship hunt. But I think you do have to argue, looking at that team the last couple of years, they are trending up. And for a guy in Manny Diaz that a lot of folks said, is he the right guy? He's had some opportunities before, and they haven't really worked out. Is this the guy that can take Duke to the next level? The answer after Mike Elko left, the answer is I don't know. Elko left that place in about as good of a place as Duke has been in a very long time, and Manny Diaz did not let that momentum go to waste. So I'm very intrigued in that team and what they're going to be able to do coming up this year. We've also got, as we mentioned, Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. I think if there is a head coach on the hot seat in the Atlantic Coast Conference, I think Brent Pry is probably it. I think Mike Norvell, to some degree, is obviously on the hot seat after a 2 and 10 year. But remember, he signed an extension going into the 2 and 10 year. So there's a lot of money that would come off the table for Florida State if they decided to move on after this year. But I still think the pressure is on. I think Brent Pry at Virginia Tech's very interesting. I think Bill O'Brien at Boston College. Again, like Boston College is just a small school that doesn't have a ton in the way of resources and revenue, which makes it difficult for a school like that to compete. Can they do anything? This is a team that has pulled some upsets on good teams the last couple of years. Is there any momentum that they can carry? So those are some of the teams that we are going to be looking at coming up today. Now, here is what I wanted to ask of y'all on the way out the door. One of the things that has been requested of us, the media, is to come up with our projected order of finish for the Atlantic Coast Conference this year. I do not think that there are going to be many, if any, members of the media that are going to say anybody but Clemson is winning the ACC this year. I have said I do not think it is quite the distance.
Has Vanderbilt not taught you anything?
Has Vanderbilt not taught me anything?
Didn't someone vote for Vanderbilt at SEC Media Days?
They did. So
yes.
I should rephrase that. I do not think that there is anyone in this that does not I don't think there's anyone here that's going to vote against Clemson who takes the voting seriously.
All right, who's the Vandy of the ACC? That's wow. Anyway,
the Vandy of
who is?
ACC?
Well, I guess we'll find out who you picked last. So that would be who you would consider.
That would be them.
Yes.
And I have to say, like, I almost kind of to some degree wanted to start from the bottom of this because, like, I think I'm putting Cal under Justin Wilcox last, mainly because not only did they get it's not a brutal schedule, but it's not an easy one. But as we mentioned, nobody lost more out of the portal than the Cal Golden Bears. They what did they lose? Like 24 guys dropped out of went into the transfer portal for Cal. They have had to restock with basically anybody that would come there.
It's so weird when you say Cal because I wonder if anyone who's not an ACC fan realizes that Cal's in the ACC.
It's been a couple of years, right? Like it's been a couple.
Has
of years.
It?
Yeah, it's been a couple.
Are you
of
sure?
Years.
I don't know.
Pretty sure it's been a couple of years. I think it's been a couple of years. Yeah. No. Listen. I just the jokes about the Atlantic Coast Conference and featuring two teams from the Pacific Coast obviously continue to write themselves. But no, I just think Cal lost too much. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a rough year. Who else are we putting down there? I think Cal's in there. I think Stanford's down there. Like I do believe that hiring Andrew Luck as their general manager was indeed a wise decision. I told you, I've listened to a couple of interviews that Andrew Luck has done over the last couple of days. Well, I guess on Tuesday when they were here. but listen back to some of them recorded by other folks over the last couple of days. And I will tell you that, like, I am a believer that Andrew Luck is going to be a massive asset to Stanford. He's a super intelligent guy. He gets it. He's driven. He wants his team to be back in the fold. I do think that was a very good hire. I don't understand why Frank Reich is the head coach. I genuinely don't get it. I don't understand it. By the way, I can now confirm, as I am at this point actively taking notes, great one, Manny Diaz is a suit and sneaks guy. He has got a pair. He's wearing a light gray suit with the all black low top AF ones with the Duke blue trim around the edge.
This is a memo thing, or is just you just look and go, okay, that's hitting. I'm doing that. I'm curious.
A memo thing?
Like everyone. Oh, we're all wearing sneakers this year.
No, I mean, how does any fashion catch on, right? Like a couple of people do it, and then other people start to emulate and copy it. And then
I wouldn't know. You'll have to tell me because
Fair enough. I'm here for you, buddy. I'm still your fashion guy. Manny Diaz confirmed suits and sneak guy. So I think Stanford's going to be down at the bottom of the Atlantic Coast Conference this year. I'm going to say Pitt is probably checking it. I'll say Wake Forest is probably checking down there. Wake Forest has got some talent, but they do have a new head coach. Dave Clawson takes off after last year. Jake Dickert steps in, and this is a big change. I mean, it's really like a program defining change here for Wake Forest. So I'm probably going to put down there. I'll put Pitt down there. I know Pat Narduzzi is very excited about this football team. I just don't see the talent. I don't see the talent that I look at and think they are going to be able to consistently compete. I think they may win maybe a game or two that we don't pick them going into the year, but I think they're down there. Fran Brown at Syracuse. Again, I really like Fran Brown. As a matter of fact, both we were talking earlier off the air, both Cole and I think that Syracuse, if they can get back to where they dominate the recruiting up in the northeast portion of the Atlantic Seaboard, if they can get back to owning upstate New York, the Allegheny, that area, Cole and I both believe that Syracuse could very well be on its upward trajectory, but this is the green flag. This is the start of that. Boston College going to be down towards the bottom under Bill O'Brien. There's no doubt about that. Again, this is around where I want to put North Carolina. I think out of 17, I'm probably going to have them sitting around 10 or 11. I know that there are some people here who are going to have them up closer to 2-3, and I would not be shocked if they end up with a couple of votes that place them down towards the bottom of the conference when it's all said and done. It is the biggest unknown, the biggest underdog in the ACC as a whole. Here's where I've landed right now. I will give you my top 4 before I submit my ballot later on this morning. I am going top 4. I am putting Clemson number 1. I am putting SMU number 2. I am a Kevin Jennings believer. I think that Kevin Jennings is a guy that can elevate everyone around him enough. I am putting SMU at number 2. I am putting Miami number 3. Again, I just do not trust Mario Cristobal. I hate to hammer it all on one guy here, but the issues that team suffered from last year, to me, were all a result of coaching and coaching mistakes over and over and over. But I will put them at number 3 with the assumption that lessons were learned and corrected. Right behind Miami at number 4, I've got the Louisville Cardinal. I like Jeff Brom a lot. I like Jeff Brom. I like this team. I like the talent that they have assembled. I like the offensive line specifically that they have built around Louisville. I really think Jeff Brom has taken that team to a new height this year. And then after that, it's kind of a slog for me. It's kind of there's a lot of spots there that I am kind of confused on where I'm going. I think Virginia is probably down at the bottom of the list. I'm a big Tony Elliott fan. I'm pulling for Tony Elliott. I like Tony Elliott. The few times that we have interacted with Tony Elliott before he left and last year at ACC Media Day, he's just a likable dude. He's just a good dude. I am pulling for Tony Elliott. Unfortunately, I just don't think they have the talent, nor do I, and this is very odd, and it's not something I want to say about it, but there's not a lot of what I would describe as like Virginia culture that is working there. I don't feel that vibe the way I do feel about some of the other teams that have showed up and are rolling through the area right now. So I'll have Virginia down towards the bottom. Georgia Tech, I'm putting up towards probably the top middle. Like I'm probably slotting Georgia Tech somewhere around 6 or 7. There was a quote yesterday, and I wanted to bring this up earlier, but there was a quote yesterday from Brent Key that really kind of got me thinking. And the thought that popped into the noggin when I was listening to his take, he said that one of the things that they are leaning on, he said Georgia Tech is right now towards the forefront of using science and technology to advance the football team, quote, which is exactly what you would expect out of Georgia Tech. And I thought about that twofold. Number one, you guys know I'm a big nerd. I love some science and technology in my sports. I think they're great. But number two, I started thinking about, all right, what if you are in a spot where you are maybe a, let's say, second tier in a second tier conference? You're a Georgia Tech. You're on your way up. You got some good stuff going. You're feeling some good vibes, but at the same time, you're middle of the pack. You're in the ACC. You're the third richest football conference, but you're as far from 1 and 2 as 3 is from you. How do you overcome that? How do you recruit in spite of that? And I think one of the things, and this is something that I'm sure Tony Elliott is working on building at Virginia, is you lean into the culture of your school. You lean into the culture of your area. You lean into the culture of whatever it is that makes you special. And I think if you are, I am listening.
All right. According to several sources, Jets quarterback Justin Fields was carted to the locker room suffering a leg injury. I don't know how severe it is, but yes.
Dude, come on. This poor dude. This poor freaking guy. I'm being very serious. This poor freaking guy. Like, this guy can't catch a damn break. He gets drafted to the Bears.
Not
Bears
a good choice of
ass.
words, probably.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. That's rough. This dude, you know what? No, I'm sticking with it because you know what I mean. This dude can't catch a break. This dude gets drafted by the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are booty cheeks. They send him out of town and immediately go hire the number one head coaching candidate of the past, 10 years. He goes to Pittsburgh. Hey, buddy, you're QB1. We got you. You're the man. He shows up to Pittsburgh. Immediately, they bring in Russell Wilson, and they go, oh, actually, never mind. But then Russell Wilson gets hurt, and he gets his opportunity to be QB1 for the Steelers, and he goes in, and he wins games. What was he, 6-2, 6-4, whatever he was?
I believe 6-2, yes.
Through 8 games as the starter, Russell Wilson comes back, and the Steelers go, well, actually, you can't lose your QB1 job due to injury, so we're going back to Russell Wilson, so he goes to the bench. And finally, he gets sent to the Jets, and he is QB1. They didn't bring in another guy. They didn't get the legs out from under him. He goes there. Not only do they have a new head coach that a lot of people are excited about, not only do they have a new quarterback that the Jets are excited about, but he's about to play for, I would sincerely say, the best skill position of talent group that he has been with since he's been in the league. He has an opportunity, and now you're going to tell me that it's over before it starts. You've got to be kidding me.
Oh, well, I mean, your finality there. We don't know the severity of the injury yet. But the fact that he limped to the sidelines, according to reports, and then he was carted off.
Yeah, I'm seeing those reports. Shefty just said, and I quote on Twitter 7 minutes ago, Jets quarterback Justin Fields was carted off the field this morning. Quote, the team fears he has torn his Achilles, which would sideline him for the remainder of the season.
Wow. That's all that sucks. That really does.
Are
the Jets cursed? Because that's 2 quarterbacks. Yeah.
This is gut-wrenching because I will say that while I understood, didn't necessarily love, but understood the path of the Steelers when he was there, I genuinely can say, sincerely, I have been rooting for Justin Fields in New York. Sincerely, rooting for Justin Fields in New York because he didn't get a shot in Chicago. He didn't get a shake in Pittsburgh. I think this guy can be top-notch starting quarterback material. And now you were telling me he finally gets his start. They made it 2 days into training camp, and he is losing a year to an Achilles. And by the way, most guys do not come back from an Achilles the same guy. I'm not saying no guys do, but you can go, especially like in the NBA, look at the numbers of the last handful of guys that have popped an Achilles. Very few of them come back averaging the same PRAs that they did before they went out. This is gut-wrenching, heartbreaking for Justin Fields.
Greeny looks like he's about ready to have a breakdown.
Greeny might have a legit heart attack on air, sincerely.
He looks like he's near tears.
But I guess if nothing else, welcome back to Rod Taylor again.
Good for him. I mean, he always seems to be at the right place or the wrong place. Yeah. All right. The first thing that's Xing is something that should be a sponsor here on the Rob Brown Show, the Dude Wipes.
I don't know how to feel about what you just said, to be honest with you.
You'd feel clean
if
we had Dude Wipes.
I've never used Dude Wipes, and that's not like I'm an anti-Dude Wipe dude. I've just like it's never really crossed into the. I've never felt compelled to buy one in the store, and then they've never been in a spot where I'm like, oh, I sure could use a Dude Wipe, and like somebody pops out wearing a lumberjack shirt, and they're like, well, I have good news for you, dude. And like handed me a Dude Wipe. So I've never used one. I'm not anti-Dude Wipe. I'm not pro. I just haven't used the Dude Wipe.
All right. You sounded like Jesse Ventura there, by the way. The reason why they're trending is because they sponsored the Cleveland Browns helmet reveal yesterday. And the cameraman fell off the float into the water. It's amazing.
What now?
All right. So it's a giant helmet.
Okay.
Because they have a different helmet. The helmets look sweet, by the way.
Yep.
They actually have stripes on them. It's weird, and they're actually brown. So there's a cameraman on the float. It's on. It's like a yeah. And he took an errant step and went in. By the way, there's also video of the shot from that cameraman going in the water.
He took the phone. He took the phone with him. Wow.
Wasn't a phone. It was a full on camera. Yeah.
I got a distant video. That was fine. I mean, listen, I will say that there are two things I would say about the Cleveland Browns. Number one, if you're the Cleveland Browns, like use the color brown, so good for you. Number two, change your name because you're an insult to Browns everywhere.
All right. It took me a second, but I got that. Okay. All right. The next thing that's Xing is Sydney Sweeney.
Sydney Sweeney is Xing because I do know that she was apparently for a hot minute there running around with Tommy touchdowns. Apparently, like, who was it? What a summer of love that Tommy touchdowns was going with, but I do not know why Sydney Sweeney is trending.
All right. She is trending because she has a new advertising campaign with a company called American Eagle.
Like the clothing company?
Yes. I would suggest maybe you check it out for show prep purposes.
Okay. Yeah. No. I appreciate that. I am also knowing what happened the last time that she was trending, and I checked Sydney Sweeney on Twitter. I'm going to wait until I'm looking on my phone somewhere else and not here in the middle of Radio Row. JIC.
Okay.
Sydney Sweeney has been in some scenes that tend to pop up on Twitter. How's that?
Yeah, it did for me when I looked earlier, but it was a rated R movie, so I guess that makes it acceptable. All right, the next thing that's Xing is Ryan Clark and Dan Orlovsky.
Do they have it out again? Do we have another spat?
Oh no. It's Cam Newton mentioned them and said basically, why do we care what they say? They were bad players.
Okay, Ryan Clark wasn't a bad player. Orlovsky, cool, I'll let it fly. Ryan Clark wasn't a bad player. Now, I will say both of them, I think, not consistently, Lonzo, but I think both of them every now and then throw out is everybody still paying attention to me take. Which is
what you got to do in their position to remain whatever relevant is. Yeah. All right. One last thing. The last thing that's Xing is Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four drops tonight. I will not be seeing it, unfortunately, tonight. Not out of a lack of desire, more out of a lack of ability. Because by the time that I get home this evening, I'm going to sleep until it's time to wake up for the show tomorrow.
I will. I'm just going to point out. I'm going at 6. We're on the side. There are seats there if you just want to, pop one and come over at 6.
It is not a lack of desire. It is a lack of ability, and I know this about me. I will say the wife wants to see it, A, because she's gotten into the Marvel movies the last couple of years, and B, because the ladies love Pedro Pascal, and so do the fellas. The dude's a dude, all right? And from what I've heard, the movie's pretty good.
Well, I'll be able to tell you.
Fingers crossed. Full review, spoiler-free review from the great one coming tomorrow. back in studio tomorrow, day 3. We want to thank our friends at Ingles, our fantastic corporate partner and sponsor, for helping us get here. I want to thank the fine folks at the Atlantic Coast Conference for once again putting on a tremendous event. I want to thank the powers that be back at the studio for signing off on another little adventure for you, boy. I want to thank Cole Bryson and Diesel from Wire to Wire for helping out this morning. I'll be around to do the same for them this afternoon, 3 to 7 here on the Fan Upstate. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Don't drink and drive. I'll punch you in the face. See you back here tomorrow to do it all over again, but better on the Rob Brown Show on the Fan Upstate. Later.
From the 2025 ACC kickoff at the Hilton Charlotte Uptown.
All right, dude, got to run upstairs for the press conference. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. See you back.